I one time always believed, more strictly than I do now, but still mostly believe, that market solutions are the best solutions. It's best for individuals to make small decisions in the marketplace for the most efficient distribution of goods. However, recent events, I think, have made it inarguable that the large internet platforms are not acting as simple wealth maximizers that we all learned about in Econ 101, but rather have taken a political slant, a political motivation, and furthering an ideology which is at odds with what a lot of conservatives and Republicans I point evidence to the prosecution, suppression of the Hunter Biden stories at a pivotal moment in the 2020 election, the continued censorship of legitimate scientific inquiry about public policy responses to the COVID epidemic. And it continues in a variety of different ways that are less noticeable in the news. So, for instance, we just learned that anyone who questions the climate change consensus is now spreading disinformation. So, on a variety of different levels, it appears as if many of the platforms are acting in ways that aren't consistent with what we expect, and are behaving in ways that actually could threaten sameness, perhaps even more important, which are our democratic institutions of free speech, and the potential for impartial government, that we really need to preserve those markets and to make sure that we have fair decision making. So that has led me, and I think many other Republicans, to the belief that yes, something must be done to respond to the power of this large internet platforms, in particular the social media. I would just side note, I think the hypocrisy is much worse than the left. You read John Stuart from the liberal left, and read John Stuart Mill. He's as hard on private censorship as he is on government censorship, but that's forgotten now by the left. They're fine with Facebook and Google censoring people on our side. So I think as far as intellectual inconsistency, we're not really there. I think we're fighting to try to preserve the institution of free speech in a medium which does not seem particularly respectful of it. So what are some of the approaches that we can do? Well, I think there are four I'll touch briefly on today. One, innovation. Two, removing some of the privileges that the big platforms enjoy, largely because of historical accident, but most notably under Section 230. The possibility of antitrust, new legislation, or existing enforcement. And finally, the wagon to which I'm hitching my star, which is state laws to prohibit discrimination by social media firms, and in particular the one passed by the state of Texas, currently under appeal before the Fifth Circuit, which I think offers a model to the nation, and which I hope and pray the Fifth Circuit will take. So let's start with the first response. Of course, we hear it all the time. You don't like the way Facebook edits your posts. You don't like what Google does to your search rankings. Build your own Google. And of course, the implicit little assumption is that Google isn't there because of accents or government preferences. It's because the left is smarter. You silly, not so bright right-wingers, you can't possibly do it. Well, certainly Parler tried. In January 2021, it was the most downloaded app in the world, and it was being downloaded at an incredible rate, one that was actually threatening to many of the platforms. But magically, what happened when there seemed to be an opposing ideological company? Well, Amazon, at the behest of certain Democratic politicians, it appears, of course, as we all know, the web services took the Parler servers away, essentially threw them offline, really destroying the momentum for that company, which is even now trying to recover. And that this, further links to Parler were blocked from the major social media So if we're serious as, Republicans as conservatives as creating an alternative, we have a problem. There is an entrenched network of facts that are going to be working against us. Okay, so let's talk about removing some of their privileges. Certainly Section 230, which was designed for the dial-up internet, which when you had a telephone and you had to use their modem and match the protocols, and as I tell my students, it was used in Western civilization about a few years after we stopped putting cuneiform lettering into clay tablets. I usually get a joke on this. It's very, very hard, tough crowd. So it was really designed for a world in which there were walled gardens, and the idea was that to encourage more conversation, to encourage more diversity and free speech, we would limit the liability of the platform, so they wouldn't be liable for every comment that was made on their bulletin boards. However, what it has become is it has become a legal shield for the platforms to impose their censorship regimes. And so they can't be challenged under anti-discrimination laws, they can't be challenged under consumer fraud laws, they can't be challenged under contract. So if we're interested in free speech, these have to be pushed back. One way is the courts to try to get rid of some of these entrenched rulings. I was once involved in a case doing that, one of the few, I think the only one, to ever win at any level on a sort of free speech grounds. And when we did, essentially all of Silicon Valley marshaled its troops. We had as interveners Facebook, Google, Twitter, and every 3 internet associations, and of course it was reversed on this extraordinary procedural reaction, and we didn't even have a chance to argue with the judge. So quick. And that's been our experience in other situations too, where we're very much outdone. So of course there's reforming Congress. There's a lot of very good statutory reform. In particular, I think Senator Haggerty from Tennessee has done a great job. But given the current political constellation, it's unlikely whether any of these nice reforms will ever get passed. They're still very much in the idea stage. Okay, so that leads us to antitrust. Again, Justice Department under President Trump did file a landmark suit against Google, and it's languishing, as all the several other court antitrust actions against Google. They've gotten a lot of setbacks. This has to do, I think, complex reasons about antitrust law, which makes it particularly difficult to win these suits against the platforms due to the nature of the markets that they dominate in. So that leads to some type of reform, and actually there's been a lot of movement on the Hill introducing several interesting bipartisan antitrust reform bills. However, the phrase is, beware Greeks bearing gifts, and I think the same thing could be said about Senator Amy Klobuchar. Many of these bills come with strings that may not be too friendly toward conservative free speech, and we have to be very, very careful about that. And so they may increase the potential for antitrust liability, but they often will end up, as a result, giving these platforms even greater power to censor. And so there we go with antitrust. It's unlikely that the Biden administration will bring any huge, useful antitrust lawsuit, and once again, it's unlikely that Congress will come up with any great idea given the current political constellation. So what's left? Well, all eyes turn to Texas. the states have been remarkably active in passing anti-viewpoint discrimination statutes. Well, essentially, serving basic information technology, stagecoach, the railroad, and the telephone, and the telegraph were under the obligation to serve all customers without discrimination. Just a basic rule of American industrial structure that it was considered, and perhaps correctly so, I believe so, that there's just certain industries where consumers should not be at the arbitrary mercy or whim of the provider, and they have a right to use their services without discrimination. And to this day, telephones, local telephone services still regulated in the same way. Airlines are, FedEx deliveries are. FedEx can't refuse to deliver you because you're Episcopalian or because you're Jewish or because you're black. You have a right to get on an airplane regardless of your political point of view. And what these statutes do is the same thing holds for social media. They can't discriminate in the viewpoint discriminate or discriminate on the basis of your political or social views in the provision of social media services. So the first state to pass a similar type of law was Florida. This was a little different. It wasn't a sort of common carrier law that protected citizens. It was more of a protection of political candidates and journalists, oddly enough. And that was challenged in the 11th. It was thrown out by a Democratic appointed district judge and is now before the 11th Circuit. I think a far better model was Texas's model, which is a common carrier approach and simply says, social media companies, you can't discriminate on the basis of viewpoint. That means you can't, deplatforming decisions and your promotion of content, you can't treat people who are essentially similarly situated but only differ because of their political beliefs in blatantly discriminatory ways. And it was, of course, challenged by a phalanx of leading lights in the big tech industry, and we had the I don't know if I should say this, we had the luck of getting Judge Pittman, who was not particularly, again, another Democratic appointee who was not particularly friendly toward the bill, the law, I should say. However, that too is currently under appeal. So that's sort of the state of the play when it comes to conservative Republican reaction to big tech. Delighted to answer questions. Again, I think it's a really sort of turning point, not just from a policy perspective, but also from a ideological or sort of values perspective. I think if we're going to go down this route, we have to recognize that in a small minority of situations, the market may not have the right answer, and that there are certain institutions like free speech, like the full participation of all citizens in political discussion, that require us to take a place. So delighted to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
All right. We will thank you both for sharing your thoughts with us. We'll go to audience Q&A, and we have at least one staff member with a microphone. I will call on people, and if you could just wait until he arrives with the microphone. First hand up was the gentleman over there. Please wait until he gets there with the microphone, just so our friends watching in digital world can hear.
Thank you very much for coming today. My question is to Dr. Canedo. I believe Section 230 was passed in 1998. Why is it that we have legislators that really can't think ahead and didn't put in the language that you can't censor speech? Why did they leave that out? Was that deliberate? You would think they would be smart enough to figure that out. And then to go to your other point, which was that if you have, it kind of goes to me, it seems like the same thing as, the baker that doesn't want to bake a cake for the gay wedding, should they be forced to bake a cake? Should a private company be forced to allow messages or speech that they don't want on their platforms? They seem to be kind of the same thing.
Okay, good. Well, I'm a law professor, so you'll forgive me if I might seem a little pedantic about my response. So as long as you're men with best, in good faith and kind intentions. It wasn't 1998; it was 1996, and I think that's important because the World Wide Web was just being introduced. Now, it was passed in 1996. It was actually February 1996. And most of the bill had been lobbied for 2 years before, starting in 1994. And if anyone recalls, and as I joked about my students in the Q&A forum, my students weren't even alive then now, but it's hard to remember. When you went to AOL, you had this walled garden. You couldn't just go anywhere. You were giving bulletin boards or stock checks. And so when Section 230 was passed, it said, look, you won't be liable for all the comments there. We thought that would be a good thing. It would lead to more comments and more openness because there would be no liability. What they did not foresee, for better or for worse, is of course social media with the power to curate everything. And they didn't foresee that courts would rule very strangely that Section 230 actually protects these censorship decisions, which I would consider an overstep by the judiciary. So, I don't defend Congress that often, but it was understandable, and I think if you want to blame somebody, it would be judges for essentially saying, look, let's expand this immunity of liability. It makes our lives easier. We get to dismiss things more quickly. Get the cynicism, but I think. Second, this is certainly not Masterpiece Cake Shop. And actually, this is a distinction, and I said it's sounding a little professorial. It really goes back to almost the 15th and 16th century. The idea is that there are certain goods that are offered to the public without bargaining or accepted and understood conditions. They were called common callings in the 16th and 17th century. And the idea is, if you go to the telephone company, they're offering you a service. You don't get to haggle. You don't have a specific agreement about it. You don't have a special contract. It's a one size fits all. And in situations where there are one size fits all, we generally accept non-discrimination requirements. So lunch counters can't discriminate on the basis of race. You can't be barred from retail establishments because of your religion. You can't be barred from public accommodations like hotels. That's because it's just this it's a one-size-fits-all offer. It's offered generally to the public. In contrast, I think the line the Supreme Court will have to draw, and they just took the case in the web designing case, is when you have a specialty agreement, a specialty product that is sort of custom made for the customer, requiring special types of negotiation and agreement, and where it actually requires the business to express the message of the customer. That's a different situation, and that's the limit of these common carrier and public accommodation laws. So I'm sorry, it was a little bit long.
We'll go with the gentleman in the front row and then the gentleman behind him.
Yes, sir. This is for Commissioner Symington. Allow me, forgive me if I need to set the table just very briefly here. I'm a retired NASA and retired Air Force officer working in space communications. And one of the things at the root of how NASA was established was when we started going to space, we had ground communications to our spacecraft. And as technologies emerged, we got TDRS satellites so that we'd get more robust coverage around the globe. And then ultimately, the communication satellites that are geostationary were there and we could communicate with the station or the shuttle 24/7 anytime we wanted to. But in doing that, NASA never went back to or abandoned the ground stations as a core capability. What we are seeing now is an abandonment of what we had on the ground for what we have in space, and I'm wondering if from a regulatory standpoint, we might be able to do more to strike that balance between what we're doing in space alone versus what we're augmenting from the ground. I just had this vision of a EMP blast at geostationary orbit, and suddenly we don't have GPS, we don't have Amazon, God forbid, and it's all gone. And we used to just strategically and tactically, route military aircraft from the ground. We rely on satellites now, and I'm wondering if regulatory pressures are working for or against us there.
Thank you. So, interesting suite of questions there. So, there's been a lot of liberalization recently as regard eSIMs, Earth stations in motion. So, mobile terrestrial stations. With modern eSIMs being much more sophisticated in beamforming, solid state components, power consumption, etc. So there's been a huge liberalization in that area. As far as teleports or other major ground installations, I think we're
beyond the last mile. So what about CDN payments? Now, arguably,
hi everyone, I'm Jane Bambauer. I'm playing the host for this particular installment of the Journal of Free Speech Law public panel series. This is, I think, the fourth public panel we've run, public panel or conversation we've run with authors who have now published with the Journal of Free Speech Law. I'm joined by my two fellow executive editors, Ash and Eugene. And Eugene is here also in the role of author, because we're going to be discussing Eugene's paper with Adam Kandub on Section 230. Adam Kandub also has a separate essay on Section 230, interpreting Section 230. And then Kyle Lengbart is joining us to talk about his essay on whether the principles of the First Amendment can scale up to the size of speech that we see today on the internet. So I suggest that we start, first of all, by anyone who has their mug handy, reminding everyone that we're promoting here partly the work of the Journal of Free Speech Law. But next order of business is let's have each of the authors describe for just 5 to 7 minutes what their paper is about for those in the audience who haven't had a chance to read or digest fully the papers. I'm going to have Adam go first, and then Eugene will present Eugene and Adam's paper. I'll take a minute after that presentation when we have both of the Section 230 papers in case Ash, Kyle, or I have any clarifying questions since the two papers are so closely related. And then Kyle can discuss his essay, and I hope after that we will be able to link all of these works and figure out what on earth should be done, if anything, with moderating content on social media and the internet. Okay, so Adam, are you ready to take it away?
Yes, I am. Just give me 1 second.
So the audience,
good.
I asked Adam like 3 minutes ago to make a slide to help the conversation move faster, so he's diligently creating one slide. So thank you.
Let's see. And it is not the most beautiful. I'm afraid. Did this share?
Yeah, that works. We can
Okay.
see it's not in presenter view, but you know. It's fine.
I'll put that in presenter view.
Okay.
And I didn't my spacing is not ideal. I apologize for that. I'll put it in presenter view. Hopefully, it will make it up for my bad PowerPoint aesthetics. So, Section 230 is, of course, the most important statute for liability on the internet. It's been called, I think, somewhat hyperbolically, as the statute that has allowed the internet to occur, or to, central to its development. And I would say in response that I think it has pushed the internet to develop in a certain way. Namely, it's been very protective rather, toward social media. And it has really allowed the internet to give voice to types of discussions that we normally would have kept between ourselves. And, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I will leave it to the policy people to think more deeply about it. But the point of the article is that courts have taken this provision, which is already very protective of internet platforms, and really made it even more so in a way that ignores and forgets not only the text, but also the context of communications law going back centuries, into which Section 230 is a part of. Section 230 was passed as part of the Communications Decency Act, which was in turn codified and passed as part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which in turn was codified into the Communications Act of 1934. So I think what's often forgotten is that we're looking at a telecommunications statute, and there's a lot of history that goes along with interpreting that, which I think courts have forgotten. So here we are. It's a somewhat unattractive version of Section 230C, and this is, for those people who follow the area, famous, if that's the word for it, provision. And so let's. The article starts by looking at C1, and C1, despite a lot of what's said in the press, which and popular accounting, which tends to concentrate on C2, it is C1 that courts have mostly used. C1 has provided most of the protection for the platforms in the district and circuit courts, and it has been read extremely broadly. So let's take a look at it. It says, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. Now, I'm sure everyone's mind already glazed over, the 7 words into that. It's rather dense. But just, going through it, it says, no provider or user of an interactive computer service. That's a defined term in the statute, and that pretty much means, at least for purposes of this discussion, an internet platform. That's Google, YouTube, Twitter. So what it says is Google, YouTube, or Twitter, or for that matter, your own website, or a website for your local restaurant. So keep that in mind as well. So the statute says YouTube, Twitter, or small website shall be treated as a publisher or speaker. Now, of course, those are terms of art, and that refer to primarily defamation law, but also things like threat and other things. And it means someone who, publishes or speaks something, some content, of any information, so any publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. An information content provider is a defined term, and of course means anyone who provides any content on the internet. So what this means is that Google, YouTube, or your local website shall not be treated as a publisher or speaker of any information provided by any other user of the internet. So that means that you say something defamatory on YouTube, or post something defamatory on YouTube or on Facebook, Facebook is not liable. And the article takes aim at the rather expansive understanding that the courts have used. And Generally, seems to me that this provision, which is very much like the common carrier and other conduit immunities, is really focused on liabilities that of third parties. It involves legal liability that results from the content of third-party posts. And what we've seen, and largely I think it really is an example of just a very sloppy misquotation, is that test has shifted to whether or not the platform is exercising its so-called editorial functions. And it's a language from an influential case, Zoram. And the what the courts have said is like, well, whenever the platform itself exercises editorial functions, then it has immunity. So that's a slight shift. That means if the platform itself decides to censor you, if it decides to, get rid of all women or all Jews from its platform, that's a function of its editorial function, or it's exercising its editorial function. And many courts have said, oh, the platform's immune from discrimination laws. If the platform says, oh, we accept comments from all people, we would never censor your speech, and makes that an express promise, the court would say, well, censoring and editing, that's an editorial function. So under C1, the platform is protected. And one of the points of the article is like, this is a bizarre extension of an already very generous provision, because it essentially says the platform as editor is immune. And that's not the point of C1. The point of C1 is that, just like the telephone company, just like telegraph companies, you're not liable for the content of third parties' posts. Your own editorial decisions, your decisions to kick people off the web or to make promises and not follow them about content, that's not protected by C1. And unfortunately, a lot of courts, including some circuit courts, have gone off in the wrong way. Now, fortunately, I think Justice Thomas's concurrence in Malwarebytes, a very interesting statement by the Texas Supreme Court, as well as several dissents in some high-profile cases in the Courts of Appeals, have been moving the other way and have been recognizing that, really, this immunity has to be cabined in. So, that's really the first part of the paper, is that courts have gone astray. They've taken a generous provision and blown it up to essentially a get out of jail free for the platforms, and it just doesn't make sense because they're immune from consumer fraud laws, anti-discrimination laws, contract laws, because they argue that these are all statements that we're making about the services we provide, namely our platforms. And these are editorial judgments. So the second part is, well, okay, if that's what C1 is, C2 was intended to further, Congress's goals, which was intended to further Congress's goals, which was to essentially empower platforms to get rid of pornography. And we're going to talk about this more with Eugene, but the point is that the immunity in Section 230 for content decisions is not found in C1 but in C2, and that we argue that the scope of these decisions is quite small. That the immunity for editorial functions and the exercise of editorial functions is really just for this list found in C2, which is obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, embarrassing, or otherwise objectionable. These are all terms that are common in communications law and refer to areas that have been regulated and have been regulated with the approval of courts. So if you read the statute this way, the last part of the article looks to whether or not it's unconstitutional, whether or not it would be violate the First Amendment if we had a statute that essentially granted platforms immunity for third-party content, but had this very somewhat narrow, or I wouldn't call it narrow, focused liability protection for types of speech that typically had been regulated on other media like broadcast and cable. And I'm very appreciative for the insight and help of Professor Volek, because I've never really done First Amendment law like this before. I don't do this pure analysis. But the results, I think, are somewhat tentative from the article. I think it is clearly a content-based statute. I think the bigger question is it a viewpoint-based statute? And to me, the biggest problem is excessively violent. I think that the prohibition, and I think I'm running out of time, so I'll quickly wrap up. The prohibition on constitutionally protected speech, which is excessively violent speech. Supreme Court has ruled that, at least in the context of video games, this is protected. And that a statute that singles out that type of protected speech could raise constitutional issues, although I'm not sure if it does, and I think there are remedies available other than this. So is that okay, Jane?
That's great. Yeah, so then I think Eugene will sort of pick up there. That the idea at the very end, I just want to make clear, is that if there is some independent route for liability based on discrimination or the purging of content, that's where this interpretation of C2 is particularly important. Okay, so that takes us to the next essay, Eugene and Adam's paper together. Eugene?
Thanks. Very violent and sexually themed programming.
Says you can't do that.
Right.
What you're telling me is C2 does not authorize the platform to pull the false statements down because falsehood, disinformation does not seem to be included. So the platform, if it takes down the false statement about another individual, risks a lawsuit, right?
So here's why it's important, I think, to recognize that C2 just provides immunity from liability. There's got to be an underlying ground of liability.
How about breach of contract?
Well, if the platform does say to me, we promise, absolutely promise, we're not going to take down your material unless it's obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, violent, or harassing. And then I post something, they say, we're taking it down because it's libelous. Well, then they have indeed breached the contract, and I don't see
but let me give you a
why
simple example.
230 should protect them.
The terms of service say we're going to pull down libelous things. I post something that someone else says is libelous. Platform pulls it down. I sue them and say, actually, this is not libel.
What are you suing them for?
Breach of contract.
There's no state law that bans platforms from taking down libelous material. If the state wants to enact such a law by saying essentially we don't want platforms to be in a position of being judges of libel, or it says we want platforms to be common carriers without making those kinds of decisions, then in that case 230C2 would indeed preempt that. I just don't know of any states that have passed such a law.
Well, I think that Texas and Florida have come pretty close.
Well, so let me give you an analogy. So phone companies are indeed common carriers under state law. And I believe they don't have the discretion, at least the one case that I've seen that deals with that, they don't have the discretion to say, we think your outgoing voicemail is libelous, so we're gonna cancel your line, or at least pull down the voicemail. They just don't have the discretion. Nothing in the First Amendment says they have to have that discretion. So to the extent that a state does say, you're going to be common carriers and you're not allowed to take down material on the grounds that it's libelous, then in that case, 230C2 does not provide the platform that kind of immunity. And
right, and that might raise other First Amendment questions related to that underlying state cause of action. But I'm still confused about how, let's say that a state does that, is maximally protective. That plus, and so basically requires more or less common carriage except for unprotected or illegal content. It would seem to me, though, that if you combine that state protection with Section 230C2, you would wind up in sort of like a TAM situation where there's a benefit to be, there's a benefit.
I agree.
Okay, you do agree with that.
So you do have a situation where the government is providing a certain kind of benefit in the form of protection for privacy.
Right.
And the flip side is also protection for platforms against a certain kind of liability. So Metal v. TAM and Iancu v. Brunetti, those remember are the trademark viewpoint discrimination cases, said the government cannot offer these benefits in a viewpoint discriminatory way. So in Tam, the government was denying it to speech that it perceived as racist. In Iancu v. Brunetti, to speech that was seen as immoral or scandalous.
Okay, and you're saying that these are content-based categories, not viewpoint.
Court deliberately reserved that question, and I'm inclined to say that there's a good reason for the reservation.
Oh, I completely disagree with you, Eugene. I think Mattel v. Tam explicitly says that discriminating against racist speech is a viewpoint discrimination. I think all 8 justices agree on that.
No, I agree.
Yeah, he says that too.
But discriminating against libelous speech or discriminating
or
against
lascivious
political speech or in favor of political speech or whatever else, that would be a content discrimination. I totally agree that if the government were to say you can take things down if they are racist or unpatriotic or anti-war or advocate for self-harm, but not in other situations, that would be an example of a viewpoint-based protection for private speech, unconstitutional.
But so something like harassing and the other categories that the CDA was sort of generally trying to protect, do you think that those are safely categorized?
So harassing means different things in different contexts. But in the telecommunications context, there's nothing to do with what people sometimes label harassment as hostile environment harassment.
Right. It's
racist or sexist or anti-religious.
It's directed.
Right.
Yeah, harassing is like a harassing phone call. Harassing phone call laws don't single out particular viewpoints. They sometimes single out particular content, which is to say that calling someone in order to abuse them with vulgarities, for example, might be punishable. And sometimes there also are just focused on content neutral things like are you sending repeated messages maybe after you've been told not to.
I actually had one more question on this, and I think this kind of follows up on a question that Ash was asking. So Eugene, you gave a couple of examples of these state laws here. So mandatory access for signature gathering, protections for campaign activity. And so these are examples where you have a special content-based category that's singled out for some additional immunities.
Right.
But it seems to me like what C2 does is it singles out a similar kind of narrow content-based category and moves it into like this kill zone, as opposed to taking the narrow category and applying an immunity to it. Now, I'm not sure how big a difference that makes, but if it does make a difference, it seems to me like this feels a bit more like the Denver area educational telecommunications consortium case, which I think Adam talked about a little bit. But it seems to me like that's really the precedent that's the most on point here. I wondered why you didn't discuss that one.
Well, so I didn't because I was told I had 5 to 7 minutes, which I think I ran over. So Denver area is quite complicated and it, for example, it upholds certain kinds of content-based viewpoint neutral sort of authorizations of restriction and then strikes down certain other ones. And it's also a very badly splintered decision. But I think as a general matter, the core of what I think was going on, well, to be sure, it's only 2 justices' opinion, but I think the best explanation is that the court was as to certain things treating certain online material as certain kinds of cable material as a kind of public forum. That is sort of said, you know, you set up these kinds of traditionally publicly accessible, kind of by law, publicly accessible channels, and now you're sort of stripping away that protection. Here, I think it's different because here they were never by
support, which is just a kind of institution that we don't have a lot of experience with in the First Amendment context.
Great. So I guess I'm curious, you know, if Kyle's paper interacts with Eugene's and Adam's in the sense that even if we put aside, if we modified First Amendment, sort of theory and doctrine in order to enable some kind of general access right, a right to access Facebook, what that actually means in terms of the level of government, government activity that's going to be required in order to facilitate that right, is going to be really significant. So I'm curious what Adam and Eugene think. I guess this gets to the sort of practical question of like, if we switch to not complete common carriage, not a complete free for all, but something that
be superior. And also, I think the way they did it is
Now we ride the Brian Callen Show. If you guys are into extreme mountain climbing, if you're into crossing the Arctic and Antarctic landmass alone or unassisted, I got Ryan Waters here, author of An American's Grand Slam. I'm going to read your biography here. This is great. Ryan Waters is a professional mountaineer, mountain guide, and polar adventurer. A polar adventurer. During 2 decades of hard expeditions around the planet, his experiences include the first unsupported and unassisted crossing of the Antarctic landmass, being on a hijacked airplane in Russia, rescue of injured climbers in the Karakoram Himalaya of Pakistan, the Everest Base Camp earthquake disaster, narrowly avoiding the 2008 K2 tragedy, near misses with avalanches, the deaths of close climbing partners, sorry, I didn't mean to smile on that. Close encounters with polar bears on the Arctic Ocean, relationships with fellow adventurers, and much more. Ryan Waters, welcome to the mother of all podcasts.
Thank you. So
I've been trying to get you on this podcast for a long time.
Yeah.
The book is wild. Can you explain what An American Grand Slam is?
Yeah, it's like the Grand Slam is just this adventure kind of thing people have started to do, or climb the highest peak on each continent, 7 summits, and then you also have to ski to the poles, the north and
I'm a fan of that. Understand violence. Be a fucking killer if you have to. I had the same thing. I love Bobby, but he's mad at me. me. Look at me. I'm in great shape, and you're chubby. I'm better. And she was like, yeah, excuse me. I'm going to go save this leg.
Yeah.
You skinny.
And how was your audio? Everything's good for you?
Everything's good. Everything's crisp.
Crisp.
My voice has got a little soda in it, little sandpaper.
You have
know
like
what I
a
mean?
sexy rasp.
Well, if I wanted to do like a car commercial or maybe just a perfume ad.
Oh my god.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It smells like possibilities. It's kind of creepy.
Well, you guys,
very Yellowstone.
You guys know our guest for today. Welcome back to All True with George Janko. I am with Brian Callen. I've been watching your stuff for a very long time. We've DM'd like almost two years ago.
Maybe.
It's been a minute. We've been DMing. And I'm just super honored to have you on. This is my beautiful girlfriend. She is my co-host for today.
Fantastic.
Please don't look at her too much.
No, she's at my age. Even looking at somebody that age is already creepy. You know what I mean? Like I look kind of generally. I blur my eyes. I go, "Hi, nice to meet you," and then I move on.
Well, I appreciate that, especially because you're a good-looking man with a rasp.
Not bad, right? With a rasp. And taller than you thought.
I want to get into your health. By the way, can we pan right here? We got a nice setup right here because I know my man is all about the health. Yeah. I did some homework on you, and I'm very, very fascinated by you as an individual.
Yes.
And I can't wait to dive into you and your psyche, and because you could get really funny, but then also you could cut deep, real deep.
Well, I think it's important. I think your comedy. I think your comedy should come from the things you care deeply about, and then you have to ask yourself: if I care deeply about them, why do I care deeply about them? What is worth caring deeply about, and what is not worth caring deeply about? And as you get older, when you guys are young, I think part of the good thing about education, if it's a proper education, is you learn how to distinguish between a good idea and a bad idea, right? And so, or good ideas and bad ideas. And that's what you define yourself on. You define yourself on the lines you're willing to defend, on the lines you're willing to fight for.
When did you start setting these boundaries or like learning curves? Because I just started getting into setting healthy boundaries with individuals that I work with or I have relationships with and family, friends, and any type of way. And your ability to be like, ha ha ha, but then when it needs to be serious, like at what point in your life were you like, has this ever been a turning curve? Like, have you ever been walked on?
I grew up all over the world. So I grew up in countries that had embraced ideas I don't agree with. For example, socialism. or even borderline communism or caste systems. So I was born in the Philippines. I lived in India. I lived in Pakistan. I lived in Greece. I lived in Saudi Arabia.
Army
Yeah,
family?
all that stuff.
Got it.
But and I had a wonderful time, and I loved the people, and I loved being around those cultures and all that stuff. But I saw the price people pay, in my opinion, for being on the wrong side of ideas. And I think maybe I started to I was curious as to why I was lucky I hadn't done anything. I was just American. I was just a white kid from America. Even though I'd grown up all over the world, I didn't live in this country until I was 14. I was still American. My parents were American. I spoke English. It was a universal language. The dollar was the universal currency. And all those things when you're in Africa and you see children knocking on the window of your van and they want the lunch that you don't want because it's gross, I watch them tear it apart. That's humiliating to me, because it was, I never forgot that, because I saw what poverty and hunger does to people. So then you say to yourself, well, why am I lucky? I didn't do anything to deserve this. How come when I was in Yemen, I saw a guy with full-blown leprosy. He had no nose. And you're a kid, and you go, I don't have to worry about leprosy. Well, what happened? How did I get here, and how are they there?
Yeah.
And that's why I take, I guess, ideas, philosophy, political philosophy, and all of that very seriously.
I love everything you just said. Jess, could you go turn off the washer and dryer upstairs so we could hear him? Clearly, and
Yeah, I sweat through a couple shirts. So they're washing my stuff. Trade. I ran here like David Goggins, not the muscle.
do you feel like people should grow up in your shoes until they're 14? Because there's a type of respect that I would grow up on, and I usually got it from ethnic people, and it was because we were first generation and we had the integrity and the respect from old country mentality. For example, I went to Saudi Arabia, and it was fascinating how I was programmed to be scared of being in that country, even as a Middle Eastern man, which is stupid to even think this way. But again, my parents fled their country because of wars that were...
Did your family flee Iran?
Iraq.
Iraq.
Iraq,
Oh,
yeah.
do they speak Arabic?
They speak Assyrian, Arabic, Turkey. They speak Turkey.
Because I was going to say, if you're Assyrian, that de facto means it's almost like being Armenian, even though Armenia has their own place. But usually there was a diaspora, and you come from somewhere within that. But I believe that Babylon, that area of Iraq, was where the Assyrian nation started. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm flattered that you know this. I didn't know about my own people until I was in high school. We had a substitute, and he's like, "You're Assyrian?" He goes, "Do you have any idea where you're from?"
Very
and I
rare.
was like, no. But your parents always tell you that our people are the best. So it's like you just hear it from everywhere. So I just thought they were bluffing. But I guess we made math and astronomy and wrestling. Once I went to the Museum of Assyrians, it was absolutely incredible. You can come down.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's as old a culture as it
So
gets.
do you think it's culture that we're missing in this type of day and age? Because I watch, and I was telling Belle this, and I'm not a conspiracist. I don't like to sit here and wrap my head against conspiracies, because I do feel like conspiracies in general could just throw you off of your whole life if you get too caught up in them. But I do pay attention to things and I absorb them. So when I'm watching sitcoms where the man of the house is always the dumbass, and they're just talking ill about him, and they're representing the father figure in the house to be such low status, and then the way that the kids in the show talk back to their parents, not for nothing, bro, if I ever even in an exciting way, in a happy way, raised my voice to my parents, they'd beat the shit out of me. That is not an okay thing. Yeah. I'm 30 years old. I just turned 30 years old, and if my father says jump, my first reaction, hi, pops.
Bro, I was raised the same way.
Did you get your ass beat?
Irish and Italian, traditionalist. get the, take your feelings. My grandfather was just saying, get the, I was like, I want to change the world. My grandfather was like, you're 18, make your bed. Get the fuck out of here. Who the fuck is this kid? Who told you could even speak? You know, there is, that's a really good question. And I think that part of the advantage of coming from a very old culture, or any culture, is that there are certain customs, beliefs, norms, behaviors that evolve over centuries for a reason. There is a great value because what it does is it allows you to be less confused about where you stand in the world. If you see people, I always make this joke, if you're Dominican or Cuban and you talk back to your mom, or you're like in Santa Monica, if you're trying to invent as Americans, we're especially more educated, upper class Americans, there's a tendency to, the more educated you are, is to throw out all the tradition and invent your own culture.
Yeah.
So now you get things like this, and I've sat in these rooms with these. It's like my child's talking back to me. I honor you, you honor me. You're a sovereign person. You teach me. You're my hero. I aspire to be like you. You aspire to be like me. So you say 50-50. Talk like, do that in a Cuban or a Dominican household. Do that in. The grandma will take her shoe off and whack you right in the ass. Okay.
There's no respect.
And
there's none.
And those people, like you go to Miami, one of the things I love about being around other cultures is that their feet are on the ground, man. They don't need a lot of therapy. They know what's up. They express themselves.
Yeah.
And I think it's not lost on me that a lot of people in our culture who seem to think that everything that was in the past is, they label it with all kinds of bad words.
Yeah, they think it's rubbish.
They mock religion, first of all. That's
I mean,
that's the biggest. That's
you're
the
preaching to
biggest
the
thing.
choir, my guy.
I mean, it's the biggest. It's so fun to mock, for example, Christianity, or just the entire Judeo-Christian ethic. I can go into why that's so simplistic. They just put it in a tiny box. Religion's about control. It's just like, okay, I know, but our entire, I mean, I'll go into that in a second, but it is the height of ignorance to do those kinds of things, and you do it at your own peril.
Yeah.
Because what happens is if you invent your own culture or you invent your own religion, what you're really talking about is inventing an ideology. You can't do it on the fly, man. Those things have evolved through time.
They come from experience and knowledge, and like, I mean, like myself, like I grew up in France, and so.
Oh, tu parles français?
Ouais, c'est ma première langue.
Hey, eyes down, eyes down.
No, je parle français un petit peu. Hein?
I don't know what you're saying, bro.
I speak French. You speak French. C'est ton première langue.
Ouais, yeah.
Sorry, guys. That's a French break.
Sorry, any French audience?
Damn, so you're French. There it is.
Yes,
Okay, keep going, please.
And so growing up in France, it's just like the culture and the way you're raised. It's you learn how to cook. Like I was making myself breakfast and cooking by the time I was like 5 years old. I was making myself homemade caramel, like, you know.
Yep.
And just you learn about art and music when you're in like the first grade. We were learning about Mozart and having to read music and know everything about him. My mom took us out to school in the afternoon so that we could walk around and learn about like all the art in the city and everything. And then when I was 10, I moved to Canada, and most of my friends like didn't even know how to cook.
Damn.
You know, and that's why, like, coming from a different, I was like, you don't even know how to boil water? You don't know how to make pasta? You know? That's crazy. So I think like
sacrilege.
Yeah, I'm Italian too, so like I'm like, what? You don't know how to make pasta? But I think that's like part of culture. You miss so many things that help you in life and raise a family and like all the things you need to know.
And I don't think that our generation of Americans that have thrown away all of that, or at least buck against all of those traditions, are happy. I just don't. I think there's a reason that antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication is at a sky-high consumption.
I talked about this on another podcast. I'd love to get your opinion on this. So I do look at life in a very biblical sense. I am a Christian, and so what I try to do is I read the Bible as instructions. I make jokes about it. I think the Bible stands for basic instructions before leaving Earth, and I'm just trying to figure out who I am and learn through which I think are geniuses that wrote these phenomenal books in this library called the Bible. And so in the beginning was the Word, and he says, let there be light, and he starts explaining how he creates. Is he starts it with his mouth, and then he explains that we're made in his image, right? So it dawned on me one day that studies have shown that vibrations do change a lot. So if you talk ill to a plant, it dies. And if you talk positive to a plant, it like blossoms to be very beautiful.
That's not altogether true, but I know what you mean. In other words, if you were to play hardcore death metal versus classical music, the plant will do well.
Yes.
I just want you to be careful of those, because that's where you get caught up. People will catch you with those kinds of. Just be careful with those statements, because I want you to make your
No, perfect. I'll look more into it. That's why I said I don't know.
But if you shout at a plant top of your lungs for a long time versus purr to it, it's going to have an effect apparently.
Okay, so there's some type of studies that this vibrations from your lips or from a speaker will cause some type of change.
Yes.
And so when I started realizing this and absorbing it, I realized that the people that go to the gym are, what are they? They're always excited and they're happy about health. The people that are depressed are always, oh, bro, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. The people that are excited about life are like always looking for the positive. So I changed the way I speak to myself, because I started hanging out with people that are not necessarily the super most positive individuals in the world. And I was like, okay, let me rewire my brain. And I would look in the mirror and I would say positive things to myself until I could correct my vocabulary towards myself.
That's great.
And then I realized that I am moving at a different vibration, if you will.
That's awesome. I love that. And I agree with that, and I believe in that.
Okay, cool. So this is something you believe in.
I do. I guess what I always kind of, when I hear young people mock religion, I'm not even Christian. I'm not practicing, but let me defend it for a sec. When I have enormous respect for the Judeo-Christian ethic, because and any religion actually, the major religions. And the reason I do is let me just take Christianity as an example. I think that people are not aware of how much they not only benefit from that ethic, but also how much they believe in it without realizing it. So let me give you an example. If you talk to most people, racism is a terrible thing, okay? Slavery, of course, is terrible. Do you know anybody who's pro-slavery? Anybody? I mean, some people are into sexual slavery, but that's a whole fucking different thing. But you know what I'm saying, right? So for the most part, people are like, hey, man, take it easy with you guys. I gotta blur my eyes again. God, dude, this is a family podcast. God, they're making eyes at each other. Anyway, but like, you take for granted that, racism is bad. You take for granted that slavery is an evil. That argument had to be fought and won for most of history.
Yeah.
For most of history, all of that slavery, just taking somebody and putting them in bondage, was what you did because you could. It wasn't considered, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about it. And I remind people that the first people to outlaw slavery and enforce that law were the British, but that movement was spearheaded in the United States and in Britain by what you people would call right-wing Christians. Because the idea was everyone is of the same moral worth.
Yeah.
Why is it that in our judicial system, that all of us believe, essentially, if I kill Bill Gates, or I kill some wretch on the street, some guy who's, some drug addict who's just sitting there in a hump, and you didn't see them, like they're lying there and I do the same amount of time. If I go walk by and shoot him in the head, I go to jail for life for that.
Yeah.
Now, traditionally, you could say, but dude, that guy has no value, man. He's taking up space. He's using up resources. I just got rid of him. It's bad meat. And you'd be like, and then they go, what's your status? And you go, oh, I'm a prince. I'm aristocrat. They go, you're good. You're a higher birth. Okay. But guess what? In this country, or in most of at least the modern world, you go to jail for a life. Whether I do it to him or I do it to Bill Gates. Why? Because our judicial system is predicated on the idea that because we're all, whether you believe it or not, there's one father and we're all brothers and sisters. What does that mean? Monotheism says that essentially all of us are the children of that one God, meaning we're all brothers and sisters, meaning we're all of the same moral worth.
Yeah.
It's moral worth. And that means you as a human being are not in a position, no matter who you are, to judge what I'm worth. Even though I'm a wretch on the street, that's not for you to judge. And everyone agrees with that. I don't care if they're an atheist. I don't care if they're a Buddhist. Everyone in this country agrees with that. And that is a Christian idea. And our judicial system is. It'd be very easy with math and rationality to argue and make a strong argument for why some people are just worth more than other people. They just are. The profoundly, what's the word? Is retarded the wrong word? The profoundly mentally retarded, mentally handicapped.
Yeah.
The profoundly mentally handicapped are a drag on resources, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that. So you could make a very strong argument, and by the way, the Soviets did, a lot of communist countries did. You know what? The Nazis did. They're in the way. They're draining resources. We got to get rid of them, okay? We would never do that in this country, but the way you argue against that is not with math, not with rationality, not with money, but with the idea that we're all of the same moral worth, and it's not for you to judge. When you say you can't, don't judge, it's not for you to judge. That means you don't know the whole story, but somebody else does. Damn.
Yeah.
Somebody
Mic
write it down, man. Why was that not me? I want music. I want wind blowing my hair back, bro. But you know what? I should be on a horse.
I promise you, all of that will be added in post.
It better be.
Everything that you just did. We're gonna Photoshop long hair,
Dude,
just
please,
flowing.
please. I want a mane. I want his hair.
Glowing sunshine.
All right.
I have a theory on why this is happening, and I would love to pick your brain on this because, dude, I think everything in life is a POV, right? It's a point of view. And if you are arrogant to only want to see it from your point of view, then you're missing out on a lot of different ideas and actual wisdom that you could be borrowing from somebody else. So my question to you is this: do you think? How do I word this? Do you think it's the iPad kids? It's the parents dropping off the kids at school, demanding the teachers to do all the work, and then when they're with their family, they're just putting an iPad in front of them and they're letting the internet raise them.
So I don't know, but I do know that every generation. How old are you now?
I just turned 30.
Yeah. So everybody 30 and over says that about everybody who's young.
Yeah?
It's a pattern. Yeah. I had a history professor who read something similar.
But we're getting stupid, bro. Like, we're getting stupider as, like...
So this history professor read this thing, and he said, this younger generation doesn't understand the value of hard work, doesn't understand the value of, taking your time, doesn't understand the value of tradition. And it was this thing, and it was a guy, it was a philosopher in, I think, 50 BC. So I do think that one thing about being older is losing touch with younger people and not giving them the credit to understand that they probably know that too. My daughter's 14 and she wouldn't disagree.
But I think but here's the thing. I don't think that you're letting the internet raise her. I think I think you have too much morals and you're rooted into her upbringing for her to decide in her heart when she needs to make her own decisions. I'd rather listen to my father's point of view in life than some dude on TikTok. And unfortunately, not that many children have that.
Yeah, I think there's a danger. I think that because this is a new thing, there are these social media companies that study what is it called? A persuasion technology, so they can get into your brainstem, and they can cause an addiction. Video games, TikTok, that's all on purpose, right?
Yeah, of course.
But you know what's going to happen? We're already talking about how dangerous that is, and kids are going to start looking at it too. And what happens with everything is you go, dude, that's crack, be careful. Crack was a thing, so was meth. And people, even drug addicts, were like, dude, you do meth, you're going to lose your house. It starts losing its, so now it's fentanyl. But I do think human beings, it takes a while, but then we kind of adjust. And maybe life's
Do you think there's going to be like
mistake.
regulations to it? Like if you're 14, you have a limited amount of time, or like?
I worry about regulations. I like education. I'm way more interested in education. So this is kind of the idea is, okay, there's a tendency for us to go, let's regulate this. Let's enforce this. Is TikTok's bad.
Yeah.
You can't do this. I don't like that. I like educating people. I like letting people know and giving them the choice. You can choose this over here, doesn't lead to much, or you can choose this over here. And the reason I like that is because the same reason I like, there's something called soft power and hard power. Hard power is what Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, Vladimir Putin wield, which is listen to me or you will die.
Fear tactics.
Right? So what do? You keep your head bowed. You bow your head. You're like, yes, sir. You lie. Okay, that's what a dictator does. What a tyrant does. It's what a father who beats his kids does. Do it my way, or you're getting your ass kicked, right? And then there's something else. Then there's soft power. Then there's the power that inspires you. There's the power that lifts your head. There's the power when somebody, just by example, behaves in a way and you just want to be like that. You just want to be close to them. That is a beautiful thing, right?
Do you know who's like that?
Who?
Jesus.
I thought you were going to say Logan Paul.
Close. Very close, but absolutely not. No, that's literally why they say when you're Christ-like, you want to be like him. And I always explain, because people will always come at me in a very malicious way, and they're like, oh, you're a racist, or you're homophobic, or you're da-da-da, you're this and that. And I'm like, bro, you haven't even read the Bible. If you watch this man and how much grace he gave everybody at a lower status, that's why he said the first is last and the last is first. That's why he rode in on a donkey. That's why the first person to witness that he came back from the dead was a prostitute. Like, his conviction was just to be with everybody equally and try to show them that you could do it through love. And so your method of like the Stalin or the Putin or this version, to me, it's like all these rulers with they have no worth, so they have to scare you.
Well, what do they leave behind? What did Sparta leave behind besides some shards of clay? What did Athens leave behind besides an entire tradition of art and philosophy? You know, so
what is it, like literature, like knowledge? Because I know they did take from them.
Well, I'm saying that you want. There's something about when your only idea of power is military might and smashing the radical thing about Christ and his teachings. The radical thing was, love thy enemy.
Yeah.
Now think about that for a sec. Like, what is the value of that? Until you get older, you start to realize that's a radical and very important thing. Forgiveness. Why is forgiveness so important? Because man, revenge feels good. I don't know about you. If anybody fucks with you, you just go through these fantasies of revenge, right?
Yeah.
But Confucius said, before you seek revenge, remember to dig 2 graves, right?
Oh,
and,
wow.
Yeah, it's like a mic drop moment, right? And a lot of the great wisdoms always talk about how revenge is, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. That was Gandhi.
Yeah.
So what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness about? What is love thy enemy? It's a radical concept, especially when this rabbi came up in Rome during a time, during Caesar's reign, where might makes right, eye for an eye. Those were the laws of the land. The idea that you would ever turn your cheek is it's
wussy-like.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It still is.
There's a lot of countries that still do the eye for eye.
Right, but the value of forgiveness. I'm not saying you shouldn't have justice. You need justice to run a society.
But you have to be a righteous judge.
There you go. Because forgiveness and loving your enemy. If something happens to you, the world will fuck with you. It'll fuck with you, and there's usually somebody behind that. And there are people that will take your dreams and tear them up. There are people that will stop your momentum just because they're shitheads. They might be jealous, resentful, whatever it might be. There are artists of pain. There are people that are just artists at creating pain on a wide scale because it's how they get off, okay? If you are stuck hating that person, if you are stuck on the idea of revenge, I'm not talking about self-defense. I'm not talking about making yourself strong, you should. But if you are stuck on the idea of revenge, if you're stuck on the idea of hatred and trying to get that person back so you can feel good, what happens is it calcifies you. It keeps you here, man.
It poisons you.
There's work to do. Yeah, there's work to do. Now you're just sitting here and you're just wallowing in your own. You can't become yourself. It poisons who you were before that, and that's why figuring out a way to forgive that person, radiating love toward that person so you can move on and get even stronger and better. That shit should make you stronger. That shit should make you more resilient. That shit should make you more generous, more compassionate. That's what a warrior does. It doesn't mean you shouldn't get a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Doesn't mean you shouldn't throw a right hand. Doesn't mean you shouldn't learn how to shoot straight. That doesn't mean that. That's all good, man. I'm a fan of that. Build your armor. Understand violence. Be a fucking killer if you have to. That's good. But also understand that a warrior can do the other thing because that's so hard.
I think a true warrior could do that. I think when I grew up doing martial arts, and the one thing
I can tell.
I know.
What martial art?
I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Really?
Yeah, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai.
Damn.
And then I did some boxing too as well, but not too much of boxing.
How long did you do Jiu-Jitsu for?
I did Jiu-Jitsu for 4 or 5 years, and then Muay Thai was
with who?
in Arizona. I don't know. I just like it was. I was being bullied a lot, so my parents thought it'd be like a good idea to get me a gym, but they had no idea it was a martial art gym. They thought it was a regular gym until I like got really messed up in a fight and just came home. And they're like, what happened? Imagine thinking your son's like at
Assyrian parents, like Iraqi parents, are like, you're going to learn how to fight right now.
Bro, no, there's
bullshit.
this kid named R2, and she was there for this. Me and him were just, we were like athletic, but very stupid in school. So we used our physical like attributes to like highlight who's like more of a man. And we would, like when I mean fucking duke it out, no gloves, not just straight up go nuts at each other just because one person thought he was stronger than me or like him or vice versa. And I'll never forget this, dude. My dad walked in on us and I had my knee like right here on this dude. I'm just punching the fucking shit out of this kid. And my dad walks in, he goes, oh, you guys want to fight? And he just drop kicks me off of him and beats the living. And dude, I'll never forget my friend staring at, like, he's on the ground staring this way, thinking my dad's gonna beat his ass next. And my dad looks like, what the fuck are you still doing here? Go home. Go home now.
Go home. Yeah. Not pointing, but this.
Yeah, go home.
Go home.
Go home.
Go home.
Have you ever got your ass kicked in front of your friends?
Fuck yes, dude. What are you talking about?
One time I'm on the computer and I'm messaging this girl named Carmen. Bro, go home. Go home.
Go home.
Computer, and I heard the doop doop, you know, where she opens up her aim, and I'm just typing away, and my dad comes in, and he's like, come on, let's go outside and play. And I'm like, no, come on, let's go outside and play. And I was like, no, Dad, not stop. And he goes, come on. I go, hey, could you just leave me the fuck alone?
Oh, shit.
And bro.
Dude, time stops.
Bro.
Dog howls.
He goes, what? This is the first time I ever said the F word in like an aggressive way. But I thought my friend Kaveh, Persian kid sitting on the couch right here next to me, I'm in my bed, there's nothing gonna be happening from this, right? My dad rips the desktop off my thing, throws it on the ground, shatters it, gets in my face and goes, now could you play? And I go, what the fuck is wrong with you? That's the second one. Then he grabs me, throws me up against the wall, picks me up. He goes, say fuck one more
in
time.
My house.
And I was like,
castle.
No, Baba, I'm sorry, Baba. I'm so sorry, Baba. One time,
you know what he did there? In a way, he showed you what the real world does to you.
He pissed on me, bro.
You understand? But the real world, I always say the real world's like my son. I make him box. I train him. I literally train him. And he's like, I can't stand it. I'm like, listen, he's 11. I mean, he's an escape artist. He's got 1,000 reasons why. And I'm like, listen, you have to understand something. The world's a kick in the nuts. I love you enough to be a bigger kick in the nuts because I'm going to get you ready for the world. Yesterday, and we're hitting mids. I'm training him. I'm literally training him. Like I throw shots. He's got to move and everything else we're doing. And it's always pulling teeth. He gets on the little scooter. Neighborhood kid rides by, kind of almost hits him, sort of. And the kid goes, fuck you. Kid was bigger and older. My son was like, what? What if I?
And you're watching this?
Yeah. He goes, he just said, fuck you. He just said, fuck you. He goes, you need to talk to his parents. I go, not doing that.
How old is he?
He's 11. I go, that's the real world, dude. Why do you think I trained you to take care of yourself? Okay, and he was like, and it was a world that he hadn't, because the kid was big and scary, and just looked at him and went, fuck you on his bike, fuck you. It screwed him up. My son wanted to hit mitts. He's like,
get the mitts on right now.
Hey, turning his body. I was like, dude, you're hitting hard. Turning his body. Hey. I was like, God.
Then his turning moment.
Dude.
Like, it's on.
Yes.
He sees the kid next time. He gets in front of him. He's like, get out, bitch.
I said that to him. I go, listen, man, you're a tiger in the tall grass. You're too small right now. You baby tiger. You'll grow into it.
It was one of those moments. Sorry, it was one of those moments for him, kind of like how we were talking about before. Whereas before you're just told to do something, you're kind of like, I'm just told to do something. Versus you're learning it, then you want to do it. So when you want to do something, you have the knowledge to do it. You actually make the change.
Correct.
And so he had that experience of like, oh, this is super important. What my dad is teaching me. Now he wants it.
Imagine in court, Your Honor, my father, he said baby tiger, and I was baby tiger. But why'd you stab him 11 times? Baby tiger and his knife.
Because baby tiger's not big enough for his teeth yet. His teeth have not grown.
I had a friend. I'm not gonna mention his name, but we had like these cul-de-sac friends, and they went to each other like war. They would TP each other, and one of them took it too far, and they egged one of the dude's father's car and it wrecked his paint. And his dad was like, that was his prized possession. Bro, I'm having dinner with my dad, and my dad, like back in the day, we have money, but he's not gonna pay for a car wash. He has a son. You're doing it for free. And so we're outside. I'm washing his car. Oh, dude, I have so many. My mom and dad is like my biggest blessing. Like, and I tell that to everybody. Like, fix your home. I think like everything else doesn't matter. I don't care if it's too late. If you feel like it's too late, like fix your home. Your home's the most.
Clean your room.
Yeah. And so
I think by the way, his dad's like the best dad in the world.
Yeah, I'm sure. He sounds like it actually. You tell me the stories, and what I hear is love. I don't hear. Isn't that funny? And then you respect him and love him.
More than anybody. I would sit in that, with a blink in my eye, I would risk my life for them. Yeah. So my friend's dad pulls into the driveway really aggressively. So I was like, oh, he's mad. But I didn't know about this war that they were going on. My parents always told me, they're like, yo, if we get a call from the cops, you're going in an ambulance. Like, I don't want to hear any vandalism. I don't want to hear any of this shit. So I never was risking my life because, like, that's how I saw it. If I ever did some shit like with my friends like that, it's like, oh, my parents would beat the fuck out of me. So they pulled up. I had no idea what's going on. But behind him, like he's standing right here, but behind him, literally like a full block away, I see 5 of my friends going right, like laughing, and they see him and they take off. So I immediately know they just did some shit, and he thinks I'm a part of it. So he comes up to me, he goes, "You think this is fucking funny?" And now he's talking like he's a grown man, and he's talking like this to me, and I'm like, I'm not old enough to drive, so like you shouldn't be confronting a kid like that. So my dad's just watching it peacefully, not saying a single thing. He goes, "Did you do this shit to my fucking car?" And I was like, "No, bro, I didn't do any of that." And then his son, my friend, was like, "No, I know you did." And they're both fingers in my face. And I'm just waiting for my dad to step in. And not even for like my favor. I thought he was gonna come in and be like, "What the fuck did you do?" And I'm like, "Oh shit, just shut up, let me talk to you guys. Don't get my dad involved." Then he goes, "So it's not you." I go, "I swear on everything I love. You can talk to my mom and dad, I just having dinner with them. I don't have any idea what's going on here." And he goes, "Get on the phone with," that was our other friend, the guy who ran away. He goes, "Get on the phone with R2 right now, and don't tell him I'm listening to him, but ask him."
Good question. Good detective work.
Right? He goes, "Ask him where he was just at." So I was like, "Absolutely." I went to call, and I just see my dad come out of nowhere, grab my phone, hang up, and he turns to me. He goes, "1 second." He goes, "Did you just ask my son to be a bitch in my home?" And the guy looked at him. He goes, No. He goes, "No, shut the fuck up." He goes, "I let you come and speak on my property." He goes, "Did you just come as a grown man, put your finger in my son's face, and then want him to go rat out his friend? Get the fuck off my property before you deal with me now. Get the fuck out of my face now."
Assyrian justice.
And the guys got in the car and drove off, and my dad goes, "I don't give a fuck what you do. But if you do it or you don't do it, you be a fucking man about it and keep your mouth shut." He goes, "Don't fucking rat your friends out."
Did he say that in Assyrian or Arabic?
He said it in half Assyrian, half. He would be. It's actually funny you bring that up. He goes, "Rune," which is like son. He goes, "Why are you fucking idiot, man?" He goes, "Why would you do this? You don't fucking." And then like the way he talks, like he tries to like blend in, because he told me this. He didn't have a best friend relationship with his father, but they were close.
Right.
And my dad was the type of dude to work 7 days a week, but he'll close his shop down to go watch me at the talent show.
Wow.
He'll shut the shop down for me to be in the recording studio. I will never forget that he was my #1 fan when I was like, he just closed the shop. It was 1 o'clock at night. I'm in the recording studio making some music, chasing my dream. And my dad has already been at work for 16 hours. And he's in the studio, he's falling asleep. And so I wanted him to like fall asleep because he was like tired. But he would get up and he was so involved. And I was just like, dude, I know fathers of my friends that are at the house every minute of the day, and they don't give a fuck about what their son's doing.
Right.
And so I was at a very young age, man. I knew right off the rip that these 2 people are like the biggest blessings. So I can't be a bad son. Right. They don't deserve it. Right. And I think that's what your kids are gonna end up being like, because I think when a father is a father figure, it's very different from just being a father. Right. Because there's a lot of people that just want to like their hands off. "Oh, listen to your mom. What did your mom say?" I heard this growing up.
Well, yeah, I used to do that with my kids because I just want them to know they're the most important thing to me. right? So I would do these things with my daughter and my son when they were really young. I would get a phone call. I'd get like a friend of mine to call, and he'd be like, listen, they want you to go to Australia for 2 weeks. And I go, I can't, man. I can't. I got my kids. I can't be away with them for more than a week. And they go, no, listen to me. Pays $200,000. I go, I know. I appreciate that. It's a lot of money. And you'd hear my kids go, Dad, take it. Take it, Dad. I'd be like, stop for a sec. No, listen, the problem is I appreciate the $200,000, but I can't be away from them for 2 weeks because I go crazy. We don't care. We don't care. Like they freak out.
No, it's in the mix,
and
bro.
I would hang up, or I would do this other stuff with them. Or I just, my son, I talk. He didn't know. He'd be over there, and I just talk about. Well, the thing about him, I knew he could hear me. The thing about the kid is he doesn't give up. He's a grinder, man. If he doesn't get it right the first time, he goes and he goes and he goes, man. He's just unbelievable. Or with my daughter, I go, the girl, she just reads all the time. I can have conversations with her. I feel like I'm talking to an adult. And I build this mythology around them.
But they believe it.
Dude, they believe it. And they start filling those shoes, man, right?
Honestly, I'm blown away by this podcast. I saw you, and I did my homework on you. I watched your specials. But first of all, your kids are blessed to have you.
Thank you,
even in their life, blessed.
I appreciate it.
Your ability to be funny and also serious is, and this is me not like sucking up to you at all. I truly believe.
I like a little suck up.
I'm a suck up. This is my little 30 seconds of sucking up. There's very, very small amount of times where I meet somebody and I'm inspired. There's a lot of times where I'm absorbing their wisdom, but I'm truly inspired by you.
Thank you, bro.
And I think that your ability to be so sophisticated and funny and have your morals intact, and you're able to see other people's point of views without knocking them and actually raising up the people around you, if it's not your family, but it's also your friends, and the way you talk and you hold yourself. If I could grow up to be in this industry and have your mindset, I'd be very proud.
I appreciate that, brother. Well, just tell the truth. You know, it's really, really hard. You're going to find there's a lot of room and space to compromise. You know, it's really convenient to kind of play ball. And I'm not saying not to be tactful, but to tell the truth, man, especially to yourself. I promise you, and it's hard. Sometimes you have to take a minute and you have to key into what the truth is. Sometimes you have to go, how do I really feel? That's hard, man. It's a constant, struggle.
Do you journal?
Yeah, well, stand-up is right. For me, stand-up is journaling.
So I journal my actual feelings like a little girl. I just got into this like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And I have so much thoughts that go through my head that now that when I'm like, okay, well, I need to put it on paper, it helps me filter what I truly feel.
Yeah.
So writing out my feelings has actually helped me. And I think the strongest tool a man can have in his arsenal is self-reflecting. Like if you could self-reflect, and be humble and meek enough to change attributes of your life that is no good to your surrounding or your relationships, I think you could be a very powerful man.
That's maybe why sitting still is really important. What I do a lot of times is, like when I'm writing, sometimes I'll just sit and I key into what I'm actually thinking about. What am I really afraid of? What do I honestly revere? What do I love truly? What am I pretending? Who am I pretending to be? Who am I really? How do I want to die? How do I not want to die? What am I going to regret when I die? If I died right now, what would I regret not doing, not saying? Who are the people I'd regret not connecting with? These are the kinds of things that I think comedy comes from, believe it or not. It's not just about trying to be funny. You'll find the funny, but get to what you actually deeply care about. Get to what actually bugs the shit out of you. And then start asking yourself, why does it bother me? Is the foundation for why I'm bothered by this sound, or do I just not know enough about life? And be open to having your mind changed, man. Let your mind be changed by people who are smarter than you, who can create a better. Yeah. Be open to that.
So, if you don't mind me asking, then, if you're sitting still, you're meditating, and you're growing, not only as an artist but as an individual. I cringe when I look at my old stuff that I created because I gotten better with my craft.
Good.
But if
great.
If you're mixing your craft with your actual beliefs and your mental, do you cringe looking at your like old specials or old stuff that you would do, or do you feel like, no, that's just the
I
the
can't
way?
watch anything I do. The only thing I could watch, I watched Complicated Apes. That was my special where I was arguing against identity politics and arguing for treating everyone as an individual, and that I liked because I think I captured what I was trying to do. I think Man Tears, my last special, I think is Almost there, but I'm happy with it. Like my stand-up, I can actually stomach. Everything else, no. But that's because I'm so self-critical, and that's not good, by the way.
I love your special, by the way.
Thank you.
Is there a special that you want people to tune into?
I mean, Man Tears is my latest.
I like it, and I also like the fact that you brought up that you're 50, bro.
56 now.
How is this possible?
I don't know, dude. I just have had a lot of work. I've had my face tightened. There's a huge...
Did you actually or no?
No.
Health
I had,
as well.
no, I had my the biggest joke was I had my lids done because my lids were like that, and because my family goes blind because some of my family were like, you get this tissue down there. So my mother was like, go get it done.
It's very Italian.
I'm not getting plastic surgery. I don't give a shit about. I don't take testosterone. I don't do Botox. But I went to this guy. Jason Diamond, I think he does all the Kardashians, but he's a dude, right? And he looks at me and he goes, bro, it's really simple. I mean, you just look a little more awake. And I was like, all right. And it's painless. So the guy took, I don't know what he did, but he took I woke up and I was like, but it doesn't really, the joke is it didn't do much because he did very little, but we did a whole thing about it on the podcast.
Did you see any difference? Literally see any difference?
I guess I look a little more light, like a little bit less tired.
Were your eyes more focused?
When you see it, I was literally men a lot of times you get this weird thing where pretty soon you can't see. Like your insurance can take care of it because your eyes gets in the way of your vision. That's my family. We have a genetic thing. Apparently, my mother had to do it and stuff. So.
You guys were very serious.
So I wanted to do it before it was noticeable. I wanted to do it That's what I said. I said if I'm going to do it, I'll just do it now. And now I'm even better looking.
Speaking of family, I had to do a little stalking.
Yeah.
But you recently just got married.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congrats.
And I have a baby.
Wow.
You have a newborn baby?
One and a 13-month-old.
Well,
Wow.
congratulations.
So I got a 14-year-old, I got an 11-year-old, and now I got a 13-month-old. All my friends are like, dude, what are you doing? But my wife is awesome.
Also,
How is it
you have
having
a lot of energy. Please.
How is it having a baby again? Because I mean, it's been 11 years,
It's
right?
the best. I'm obsessed.
Are you not scared? I feel like I'd be fucking
Yeah, you're
paranoid.
terrified because the problem is I hate loving something that much.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, bro. I got a dog, and I would never compare a baby to a dog in my life.
I hate it.
But it's just like you have to depend. Your life is in my hands.
And all I do is play with him all day. And all he wants to do is play. It's a disaster. No, it's a disaster. I hate loving. If I could do it all over again, I might not because I don't like that my heart is in three different locations.
Yeah.
I mean, it is that vulnerable. It's like the world becomes so fragile, right? And forget something bad happened to him. You don't want to see their feelings get hurt. I watched my son's feelings. His feelings got hurt with this kid. He was just devastated.
But you hit those mitts, though.
Bro, hit those mitts. Turn your body. Squash the bug. Hey, hands up, It was beautiful. That's life. So that's part of it also. Building your, like teaching your kids, my opinion, teach them to have a sense of humor about themselves, self-resilience, self-reliance, Don't take the world too seriously, man. And just understand that nothing comes easy. Nothing, man. Anything worth it takes a long time. I hear anybody write a book about 3 easy steps and I run the other way. Don't tell me I just stop listening. The minute you start trying to reduce the learning curve, I'm like, I'll see you later, bro.
Yeah.
Takes forever. Life is one continuous mistake. You're gonna make way more mistakes than you don't, and you're gonna take a lot more than you did, and you're gonna be a lot more wrong than you are right. Put that on your tombstone and accept that, and we're good. Let's go. Don't worry. Just keep falling in the right direction.
Falling forward.
You're never gonna get to the promised land. It's not the point, man. The point is the reach.
It's the journey.
It's the reach. Just keep going.
Yeah.
And you will face adversity. You will face, but just the more you can get used to being uncomfortable, the better.
I saw a clip. Please go.
Oh, good. I was just saying it's good. Like those are all really good values that you're helping them kind of steer by. Certainly, don't take yourself too seriously because I feel like it's easy to kids right away if they take themselves so seriously, then they become prideful, and it's really hard for them to take criticism or for them to be okay with making a mistake or being wrong with their friends.
Perfection,
even.
Right?
Right.
Perfection.
Yeah.
Do you have some of that? Is that why you're talking that way?
Do I have?
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be when I was younger.
Yeah.
I was a big perfectionist, big control freak.
Yep. Because the
But-
way you're speaking, I picked up on that. I could get that. You sounded like you were talking from experience, which is cool.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah. And I just, yeah, and from like, I right away, I reflect from a young age, really reflected fast. And I was like, oh, okay, like me being so controlling over things is only gonna hurt myself. And so I need to like learn how to let go and like be okay with things not going my way. And that's something that helped me so much, like learning that.
So you make a good point, because to piggyback on that, you have to be aware of the quest for self-perfection. We all want to be perfect, don't we? And we work really hard at it, right? But man, what you just said is so important, right? So let go. Sometimes you got to realize that you're flawed from the start and you'll be flawed at the end. That's how it is to be. That the human, we are doomed. We are doomed in some ways, and I say this in a good way, but we're doomed in this pursuit of self-perfection. Okay, we're doomed in it because it's a game we won't win. We just won't. But letting go and realizing you are flawed. Sometimes that's where I think faith comes in. Where are you letting go to? Where are you letting go? When you say I'm letting go,
Yeah.
you know,
Who you trusting on?
Yeah, well, you know, letting go. That letting go has, it, in a way, it's a free fall, and there's trust involved. Well, who are you trusting in? That's why I always say to people who you know, that's kind of where, that's another way of expressing something like God, or something like the existence of something bigger than yourself that you cannot measure, that ultimately you have some faith in, because if you keep doing it, it's going to work out. That's what that is. I think with all of us, at the end of the day, there's got to be meaning to your suffering, right? If you suffer well, if you suffer truthfully, if you stay in the desert, you will find light at the end of the day. That's how all of us look through our lives. If you don't, that's the problem with having zero religion, or at least zero faith in anything that might be bigger than yourself. If you do that, man, good luck when something really bad happens to you. You'll have nothing to fall back on.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I like what you mean by having faith, and people always go like, oh, you push Christianity. I push Christianity because I know it works for my life, and I do believe that Jesus is my God. But I tell people, it's very dangerous to not have a faith. Because if you think about it, like, first of all, where's your morals intact? Are they intact in your own brain? Because I don't think you should be holding your own morals in your hand. Like, I don't think that you should be setting the standard already, especially if you're like 15, 16, 20s. Like, you're not capable of understanding it. I think wisdom comes from experiencing, not only from yourself, but you can learn it from other people. But if you don't have anything to like guide you or have some type of moral compass, I know that generally my base value usually are fuck-ups. So why would I put...
Have you ever heard the expression that everybody's religious? Everybody prays to someone. Like everybody, so you may say you have no religion, but it's impossible to avoid the trap. Your religion may be atheism. You may be very religious about your atheism, very religious about your rational world. You may be very religious about being able to explain everything at a material level. That is a religion, you know. The idea that I have all the answers, that I can ultimately...
It's a belief.
Quantify, yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
But you're gonna have, and then there are people who worship themselves. That's kind of what happens, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where it all leads to be honest.
Well, good luck with that. I'm a little older. I've seen how that works out. Good luck with that.
It's literally, I think that is the fastest way to your tomb. I think, like, that's why I say it's like you can't hold your own moral compass. It's like you're going to be running around in
Because also,
circles.
too, you can't grow because then you think that you're right and you have it all figured out, right?
Start shutting other people out completely.
Yeah, you'll never, like, move on from that because you'll never intake what anybody else is
But
saying.
that's wrapped in pride and greed as well. So, like, that's a little box that come together.
Yeah.
I have one more question about this because I watched this clip. It went, like, super viral where Joe Rogan got upset with you for trying to fight Brandon on his Brendan Shaw. And
so he didn't realize that I was
I thought you were joking.
I was doing
bro.
a bit. I thought
you were fucking around.
I was gonna say, you come to my house, I will kick your ass. And I was gonna say, the joke was, I was gonna go, you show up, you mess with me, I'll show up at your house and I will kick your ass on your doorstep. And I go, and that goes for you too. I was about to do it to Brendan. And Joe misread what I was saying because he's like, that's toxic. And he's going through it. And I go, hey. No, I was in the middle of a bit. And I watched it recently.
They cut you up to make you seem like you're genuinely like...
No, I watched it recently and I was like, and I remember I was like, wait, what the fuck? I was in the middle of a bit. I got stopped. I'm not trying to fight Brendan. He pulled my head off. You know?
That's so, because dude, you were like, the way they cut around, you're like, no, I don't give a fuck. Like, no, show up to my house. And he's like, no, dude, I hate when you talk like that.
Yeah,
like,
no, that's not what I was. I was in the middle of a bit. I was like doing something.
I knew, because I wasn't gonna even bring it up because I was like, is that real? Is it not real? But after sitting here with an hour of like your like mindset, I go, no fucking shot. Like this guy was trolling.
Of course I'm trolling. I was literally gonna go, and that goes for you too. And I was gonna mess with Brendan because that's what we do all the time.
Yeah.
And then obviously he would kill me, but I like to just poke the bear a little bit. So I would have poked him and waited till, and then we would have done something. But Joe, he misread the whole situation.
Did you guys talk about it after?
I just talked about it on the podcast because I just recently saw it. And on the podcast, I was like,
Oh, so you didn't even know until well after?
Oh, no. And I said, but it's been living on the internet. And I said to Brendan on the podcast, I go, hey, bro, remember the time? And he goes, I know you were in the middle of a bit. I go, I know, but they think I was being serious.
No, dude.
I got so interrupted.
You got clipped hard.
Oh, dude,
and by the way,
that's the problem with the fucking web.
That was a viral clip, and then the Bobby Lee clip of him talking about that situation.
It's so funny.
Was that real?
Well, where he was molested or something?
Well, yes. Is that real? And also, is it real that like, was that like a bit you guys were joking about, or genuinely were you just like caught off guard and you guys were like cracking up by it?
Oh, that was so funny. I mean, no, he was being silly, but he's so fucking hilarious.
Because I thought he was being serious, and that broke my heart. Because I was like, oh my god,
Bobby is one of the funniest people on
he
the planet.
is, and I unfortunately got destroyed by him on my podcast on Impulsive. We were just going back and forth, and I was tied into some shit, bro. It full circle came all together pretty nicely, actually.
He's too good.
He's a wizard. He's a wizard, and also, but
he's one of the best.
If I had to take a back step, I'm honored that it was with Bobby. You know what I'm saying? Like, if I had to have like some type of feud or whatever the fuck it was, like where it was like made and amended and like all that shit. Like, I grew up watching Bobby Lee, so like it was kind of funny. But all around, I just wanted to know if that was serious because, bro, he's so good at his craft. I can't separate his reality
That's
to
what
his.
makes him so amazing.
He's one of the goats.
His stand-up.
One of the best.
Well, it's like Eric Griffin said. We were watching him one time at the Comedy Store, and he was crushing. And he goes, "It's like listening to a Led Zeppelin song. I don't care how many times he does certain bits. It's as good as a Zeppelin song. Like you never get tired of Led Zeppelin. It's like it's just high math, you know. But that's what he does.
He's so comfortable on stage. I'm new to stand up.
Yeah. You're doing stand up.
I am doing stand up.
Oh shit.
I'm doing stand up,
Okay.
and
Nice.
I got to actually perform in front of Chris D'Elia and some of your friends, and I have this in because I record everything that I do. Performing in front of Chris was the most nerve-wracking experience I've ever had in my life. Because I could recite his specials. I grew up like really into his shit, like especially after like the white drunk girl clip, and when I found him, and then after that I was down a loophole of his.
Oh, thank you.
What the fuck? Oh god.
So Enrique from the Laugh Factory, he told Chris, he's like, hey, he's about to come, so he came to watch me.
Oh wow.
And it was the first time Belle got to watch me. And I remember walking up to him, and I was just like, man, I just hope he thinks I'm somewhat good. And I go, what do you think? And he showed me his phone. He goes, read my text from me and my wife, or my girlfriend at the time. And I read it, and he goes, I've never seen somebody start like this. He goes, he's phenomenal. Wow. And then a few other comedians that I look up to all sat around me, and they're like, yo, you got it. And they were just like all on camera. And I'm sitting there getting my eyes watered because I was like, I just wanted them to say, one day you're going to be good.
That's what I would have said. I would have said to you, I go, don't ask me that question now. I'll see you in 5 years.
Exactly.
But if you work at it, you have a lot of potential.
I was blessed because I walk into situations, and God has opened up doors quick for me. And for example, when I met Logan, he opened up the internet for me. And then, you know, I had a movie poster here, but I just hung up Goku. But I met producers and directors. They believed me. They started putting me in things. And then I met Joe Coy. And he called me, and he's like, hey, I need you. You're coming on stage. I think you're going to be a stand-up comedian.
Wow.
And so...
Are you opening for Joe?
I was. That's how I started. My first...
That's a big deal.
Yes. So the first
so if
30 times...
If Joe's having you on, that's a big deal, man.
Is the most...
Just Joe Coy.
Yeah.
Bro, I was right here looking in the mirror when I got the call from him.
First of all, you must be good enough to do that. That's a big deal.
He didn't even watch me. He saw me like ad-libbing and just being like, you know, improvish. And he was open. He's like, come open up for me in Arizona, and I knew Arizona. And I'll show you after the podcast. But I went on, and I just remember being like, oh, I feel like I'm really naturally good at this.
Yeah.
And then so on and so forth. I started performing in front of people like Enrique and all these people, and they were like, yo, come on stages, like come. And so I was just like, Chris asked me to open up for him, and I was just like, dude, this is insane. Like, if you would have told me a year and a half ago that Chris D'Elia even knows who I am, let alone offering to come onto stages, like, I would have fucking never believed anybody. But I would say it's 80% just me being grateful that these comedians are even giving me notes and like helping me.
Yeah.
And then also I think I kind of got my wheels turning with being in front of the camera for like 9 years. That I'm not as nervous as an individual that would just start performing.
Right.
So it was just perfect timing, and I'm really, really, really excited. So my question to lead up all into this is, when did you find your voice? Because I'm starting to realize that every time I get off stage, I go, oh, that's who I am. And then I'll get off stage and I'm like, oh, that's who I am. And I'm like, and that's why people are like, why aren't you posting your stuff? And I'm like, it's been a year. I don't know who I am.
Good for you.
I know I'm good at telling stories, and I'd actually really love to show you my work.
I'd love to see it.
I'm confident in it.
I'd love to see it.
I just feel like in 5 years, I truly, with all of my heart, I think I'm going to be a very dangerous man on stage.
I love hearing that.
I really do.
I believe you.
Logan is very critical over me, like insanely, like made me quit music, do all this stuff. He watched me perform live on camera. He cried. He goes, I can't believe.
Dude, that's a good guy. I only met Logan once, but I am very impressed with the Paul brothers, because I feel like Logan, at the end of the day, and I know people that know him well, is just a good person, man. And the fact that he cried, that tells you a lot about him, because he cares about you.
They're the most generous people.
Hardworking too, right?
They're hardworking, but they also are like psychotically like father figures. The way they talk to the people around, they're very cutthroat, and like they don't care about your feelings because they want you to do better.
Results.
I would shape. Say me and Logan like even stop being friends. Say something ridiculous happened to us and we're just like no longer boys. There will never be a day where I'm alive where I don't give all of my credit to him.
So cool.
Because not only did he put me on a platform that I didn't deserve, but he believed in me and shaped me to be a man that I am.
Look at what they've done. Look at these kids. Like, you know, it's astonishing. Both of them. You know, I mean, Jake Paul is somebody that I'm taking seriously as a boxer. Do you know how hard that is? You know how hard that is? I boxed. That is...
What do you think of him as a boxer? Like all around? Like,
I think you don't get... I mean, for the amount of time he's done it, you don't get better. And he's putting himself in the ring with guys like Anderson Silva. That's no joke.
So you don't believe in the whole like...
No, that's hilarious. Throne?
Yeah.
Come on. No, I don't. There's no truth to that.
No, I would always fuck with him on podcasts and be like, come on, we know. And he literally pulled me aside. He goes, bro, you got to stop making jokes like that. He goes, because people fucking believe that shit. And it's kind of stupid,
anybody
bro.
Who believes that just knows nothing about sports, nothing about fighting, nothing about Anderson Silva, nothing about any of that stuff.
First of all, like every single stop on the way there, Anderson Silva doesn't care about money, and he doesn't care about anything but the respect of the
He was
fight.
trying to take Jake's head off, and when Jake knocked his ass down, that was real, dude. Believe me. Anybody who wants to take a punch from Jake Paul is welcome to, but especially people who think that fight was rigged. Go ahead and see what that feels
I
like.
know. I can't believe the amount of people like keep saying that. It's like every time he like wins, oh, it was rigged. It was rigged. How?
Because people like Jake, and for that matter Logan, remind people of what they're not doing.
Oh yeah.
It's people like that are very disturbing, because you go, oh shit, I'm lazy, or oh damn, how do you do that? How are you?
They've accomplished so many different avenues.
At that age
Yeah.
already, and it takes guts. It's ballsy, man, to get in a ring. It's ballsy.
But they have balls, bro. They
Obviously.
Those guys do not. I mean, dude, fighting Mayweather. Like, think about that. Fighting Mayweather. Like, people are like, oh, bro, he's retired. He's da da da. He's da da da. I go,
the best
bro,
ever.
that's Mayweather.
Correct.
What are you talking about?
Correct.
That man in his whatever, not even in his prime, say his worst state, is better than a lot of professionals now in
That's
their
right.
best state.
That's right.
It's just straight up ignorance, and it's just hating, and it hurt people hurt. So that's why they're going to
But
go
that's
ahead
what's
and.
going to happen. In fact, I would say if you're not getting a lot of hate, you're probably doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I really would. I mean, it's what anyway? This hate, what is it? Just a bunch of noise. It's a bunch of white noise.
What was the most hate you've ever had in your career? And what was like a stumbling thing? Because I learned, believe it or not, from the Bobby Lee situation when all that shit spiraled.
I had the same thing. I love Bobby, but he's mad at me.
Right now?
And I took responsibility for it. Yeah. Well, with Bobby, Brendan was getting a lot of hate, and then some people came to us and said, "Here's where it's coming from." And I made the mistake of jumping to conclusions. I spoke out of turn, and I love Bobby. I've known him I love the guy, and I've known him for way too long. And I was wrong, and I, I've apologized and everything else. And it's one of my biggest regrets I've ever
Really?
done. Yes, I love him, man. He's my friend.
I love how me and you both have that same story.
Yeah, but you got to admit, you have to own up to what you did. And and we had a talk, and I said, you're right, I'm wrong, and I'm 100% wrong, and you're 100% right in this. And I jumped to conclusions, and I should have given you the benefit of the doubt, and I didn't. And that's all I have to say about it. I'm not going to make excuses for myself.
How did he take it?
I was outside of myself. I was defending my Brendan, who I love. That's my brother. And I got emotional, and I was defending him, and the wrong guy Bobby was 100% the wrong person to
put the heat on.
Put the heat on.
Yeah.
And I was just wrong. And sometimes you're just dead wrong, and I was. And I said it, and I've owned it, but it doesn't matter. Sometimes you fuck up, man, and sometimes you have to pay the price. And I hope, I just miss him, but I haven't talked to him in a little bit. Yeah.
Really?
But it's not like that. I mean, I just think Bobby has said, like, he just needs boundaries, man. Bobby was always the guy who was, the funniest guy in the room, but people take advantage.
Because of his heart.
People like, he's a man. You can't treat somebody, especially if you're a friend, with a lack of respect. And I think I did that to him. If I look back on it, I was outside of myself. I had a moment, and it was one of my worst moments. And I have to live with that. But
how long ago was this?
About now a year. But it's okay. But either way, I think the lesson is, if you fuck up, and I did, you better own up to it and admit to it. And he didn't deserve it. And I love the guy. So.
Well, it's the best thing you can do for you to be so self-aware, to be like, okay, this was on me, to take full responsibility. Most people don't want to. It's too hard to
always
admit,
do. If I fuck up, man, I'll own it. And that's all I can say. I'm not perfect. That's the one thing I regret in my life, is speaking to him that way. And I apologize the next day, but it doesn't matter sometimes. Sometimes you say some shit and
cuts deep. Yeah,
and just be careful. Be careful. And I should have known better.
I was reading from the Bible, and it described the tongue as the sharpest sword, and be careful how you thrust it. And it just dawned on me that people always say, "Oh, that cuts deep." How some people are like, "Oh, I forgive you," but sometimes, man, you cut so deep that like it really.
There may not be forgiveness, or it's never the same, or they can't forgive you.
They can forgive you, but they can't forget it.
Yeah, and that's fair, and you have to own that.
Yeah.
But I think, here's the thing about life: keep your promises don't take what doesn't belong to you. And if you fuck those two things up, make amends.
Yeah.
Make amends, dude. Don't blame, don't accuse somebody of some shit, or just attack somebody because somebody told you something and then expect you're going to walk away from that. You better be careful about how you do that, especially a friend.
I love your mindset, man. I really do. I really love your mindset. If a lot of men had this type of mindset, I think we'd be in a lot more peaceful circumstances.
Well, maybe I'm more at peace because I tell the truth. Like, just tell the truth, man. I fucked up, and I regret it. And I don't blame Bobby for being mad at me. And we had a talk, man. We had a real talk, after all of it. Then obviously online you get all this crazy shit, but but
especially from his audience. His audience is cutthroat.
Yeah, but they love him, and I get it.
Yeah.
I love him. And they love him. They're like, hey, fucking, what is this bullshit? What are you, a fucking bully or a scumbag? Well, in that moment, I was. I'm not, but in that moment, and especially what's crazy is that the hardest thing is if it was somebody I didn't like, I don't give a fuck. But it's somebody I love, like that guy, who I have history with. We spent a lot of time together, man. That's
you guys are both on Mad TV,
yeah,
correct?
Well, we're not at the same time, but I mean, you're talking about a guy who I watched. We were together, like at the Comedy Store and doing stand up, and he's the fucking best. He's anybody who has a problem with Bobby is that they have the problem.
Yeah.
So don't be surprised if his fans love the shit out of him and come after anybody that fucking treats him poorly.
No, he deserves it.
Yeah, their fans are right. Again, this all comes back to if you fuck up in your life, it's just own it and just take the fucking pain because you don't hide behind some bullshit, man.
Mm-hmm. And you'll feel a lot better about yourself with yourself. Yeah. But I mean, it seems like you have a really wonderful heart. So I'm sure sometimes people just need time, and I don't doubt that in a little bit he'll realize like, oh, that's a quality person in my life.
I hope so. I miss him.
Yeah,
but
no, he'll come around. He'll come because you know why? The truth will come out, and and you guys are two grown men. And you guys,
I think he knows. We'll I think, but it's like Rogan and I talk about this all the time. Like Joe and I always talk about how important it is just you don't get away with it, man. You're not going to get away with like backing some company you don't really believe in. You're not going to get away with. You just got to be careful. Now you're going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Again, you're going to fuck up. You're going to be told something. Maybe you fuck up, but you just got to make it right.
Yeah.
You're never done learning.
Yeah.
How did you and Rogan meet?
We on Mad TV.
Oh, he was on that as well.
The original cast of that. Yeah, he showed up. This is 27 years ago, before you were born.
So cool.
And
I'm blown
I was born
away.
20 years ago.
You're not on anything. No testosterone boosting. No.
I just had a whole panel done too on my body.
What is your secret? How are you so like active? Because I don't know men in their 20s that have
consistency and just working out and just eating well and discipline.
What's your like eating health journey like?
I just listen to my body. Like I lately, like sometimes I'll just go crazy. I'll be like, I'm not eating any sugar. I'm not eating any wheat, and I'm not drinking any alcohol. And I'll do that for 6 fucking months.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. I'll work out like crazy.
You smoke weed or no?
I don't. But that's not because I just don't have the constitution. I'm just delicate. By the way, a lot of it's just because I'm delicate. It's not because I'm disciplined.
What does that mean?
If I have 2 whiskeys, the next day I'm a fucking zombie. So it's not that I'm disciplined. I'm just a bitch.
Dude, that's actually such
You're cute ass bitch.
a good.
I'm cute.
That's
do
such
these
a
make,
good
do these
point.
bring out my?
Yes,
everything.
It really adds.
Especially your eyes. Are
you
popping
need to
out.
work on your looks.
I've been telling her, bro.
Do something. All right. What were you saying?
No, but that's actually such a good point for you to say you're just delicate because that. No, wait, just hear me out. That just unlocked my own thing because I'm
delicate.
No, because I always thought I was like, oh yeah, like ever since I was a young age, my mom and I we went through this whole like health journey thing and all that stuff because I was very sick, so I was very delicate when I was younger. And so now I always think like, yeah, I'm just dedicated because like I have a strong mind, so when I eat healthy, I know how to do it. But like you're so right, that's not it at all.
Yeah. Well, that's why I always say I hate discipline. I hate the word discipline.
It's a nasty word.
First of all, you can't do it. Like, you fucking, okay, you can be disciplined for a while, but fuck off. Like, I believe in inspiration, and I think that you will always go to what gives you pleasure over pain, okay? So figure out a way to associate good eating and good lifestyle with pleasure. Like, good things lead to that direction. There is a pleasure in being disciplined and self-restricted. Like, I like watching you eat dessert, and I just judge the shit out of you silently.
That's so funny.
I saw a bit that you were talking about some girl on a plane with you, and she was like,
"Oh yeah,
that was a great bit."
Isn't that a good bit?
That was a
True
great
story,
bit.
man.
Could you say that? Because I don't want to butcher it.
Yeah, what happened?
Just this woman who it was great. This long and short of it is, I was judging this larger woman who was sitting next to me for eating cookies, and she ordered 2 cookies. She was like, "If you're not gonna eat those, I'll." And I'm just sitting there watching her eat cookies, like just watching her pancreas just shoot out insulin, and just sitting there going, "I drink water because I'm pure and I'm fucking disciplined, and you're weak." And then this woman had a seizure next to us, diabetic seizure, and
oh my God, for real?
And this woman, basically sprang to action and kind of saved her and helped her out.
Wow.
And she was an emergency room nurse. So I'm not going to go through the whole bit. You have to watch it. But basically, the idea was, I was judging this person, and at the end of the day, the Cookie Monster saves lives. And I fucking sit and do nothing but judge people and fucking worry about me. me. And I'm fucking, look at me, I'm in great shape, and you're chubby. I'm better. And she was like, "Yeah, excuse me, I'm going to go save this life." You skinny fuck. You useless skinny fuck. You sit in your chair, and I'm going to fucking go make the world better. And that's just a great lesson.
That's hilarious.
I love the way you tell your stories when you're on stage. It's so vivid. I feel like I'm watching it.
Yeah.
The way you could articulate your stories and
don't be afraid to add things to your stories.
Well, I'm gonna steal your material.
Yes,
I'm not gonna be afraid of that either.
But don't be afraid also to, as a comic, it doesn't all have to be completely true.
Oh, I fabricate a little bit. I heighten it up.
No, because I tell the story about when I was in Africa. And they poached this rhino, and it's like this thing at the end of Mantiers. And somebody said, "Is that true?" And I said, "It's 100% true." Now, did it happen exactly like that? Maybe not, but that's not relevant. There are things that are true that didn't happen. That's why fiction has deep truth to it, right?
Yeah.
You can read a book or see a movie and you go, "Fuck, life is that." That's more true than your everyday bullshit. So you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
That's an important thing as an artist.
So
Don't be
lie.
afraid to add some shit. Because I talk about how she's flying the plane and she's doing all that stuff, and that's just funny. You gotta add that, because in my mind that's what it was.
Yeah.
Or the way I talked about my dad in Never Grow Up was, this giant Marine who does all this stuff. Not all of it is necessarily true, but it is. But it is, because in my mind as a kid, that guy I'm talking about was exactly that.
I can see that.
You're painting out your feelings, like how you feel about a situation. You feel so differently and so widely about it. So embellishing into the story, it's like that's your feelings.
I got a part. What they said, you're not good for the part because you're not. They need a guy who's like 6'4", 230, and like super muscular. And I go, I am perfect for that part, bro. And my agent goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Because I walk around like I'm 6'4", 230, and I think I am. I believe I am that big. Give me the fucking role." And I went and I got the role.
No way.
Because I behave. There's nothing funnier than a guy who's 5'11", 170 behaving like that. That's better than that guy.
Yeah.
Right? It's like that guy you're kind of afraid of. That guy is big because you're like, why is he that crazy and why is he this confident? Is he crazy enough to fucking, like, what's going on with that guy? That's way more funnier. That's
Well,
comedy.
congratulations for booking that role.
Thank you, sir.
I really appreciate it.
What is your favorite movie or TV show you've ever worked on?
I don't know. Believe it or not, my favorite TV show was Seventh Heaven, because I got to play this alcoholic and who's now sober, and it was really cool. But
a lot of layers.
I've never been on a set where I didn't want it to be over. I don't like acting.
Really?
Bro, I just got into this. You know what? I think
it's bad to say.
Is it because you're a creative monster, so you want to create it? You don't want to recite it?
Fuck, it's just too much waiting around, bro.
So much fucking waiting around. For just one hit of
Say
a
my
one
fucking
line,
line.
dude.
Pick up some knitting or write a
Bro,
book while you're
I
waiting.
love you.
Okay.
Stand up, bro.
Bro,
stand
I
up.
fucking
You're
love
gonna
you.
stand there and wait. You hit your mark. Yeah, let's do it again. Can you bring your hand down more when you're holding the gun because you're blocking your face? Fuck off. That light went out. You gotta wait for the light. Can you wait the light? And then I gotta sit here. I can't move. All right. It's fucking 5 a.m. I'm getting makeup. Fuck it. No.
And then,
I'm lazy.
bro, everything you're saying is 100% the vibe that I've been on lately, and it's just I don't want to do this. It's not like how I thought it would be growing up. I thought when I go up, people would be high fiving me, makeup artists like fling makeup on me. That's it. I get on, just action, boom, and they're like, nice cut, fucking, you can't do better. It's impossible. Rap, and it's not that, bro.
No, it's not that.
It's a lot of, hey, be here at 6. We're not shooting until 2 a.m.
Exactly.
What
So
the
you
fuck
gotta
am I
love
here
it.
for, bro?
You gotta really love it.
What am I
That's it.
here
That's
for?
it.
Why am I here?
Days.
8 hours before I need to be here, bro. It's just in case. In case fucking why? Why? What? You never even shoot on time.
Yep.
Why am I here early?
Yep.
Sorry, I
That's
had
true.
I had to vent this shit,
It's
bro.
true.
I
It
do
is
not
what it is.
feel the way they're feeling, and I do not attest to that.
But speaking of a test, Belle's testing for a very big show coming out.
Ooh, yeah.
It's all matter of time.
I give this to you as something I wish I'd known, and I heard it on that documentary. Well, Stutz, Phil Stutz is a therapist. He did that. What the hell is his name? The actor. Oh God, he's a little heavy. He was in Get Him to the Greek.
Not Jonah Hill.
Yes.
Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill did a documentary about his therapist.
Okay, so don't tell me anything.
So good, dude.
Bro, I heard this was like
So
life
good.
changing.
Bro.
Oh, the new movie that just on Netflix?
No, not a movie.
No,
it's an
on-
actual
a-
doc
it's
with
a
his
doc.
therapist.
Okay, you got to see it.
Oh.
I'm gonna watch it
And
tonight,
then,
actually.
And then he did Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. And he said something that I fucking wish I'd known when I was.
Could you elaborate on that?
He said what
The part that you wanted to explain to her.
Yeah. So he said actors make a big mistake. When they go in the room to audition, they leave their shadow at the door. And there's like, what do you mean? He's like, you have a dark side and you have a light side. And when you go in with just your ego and you say to your shadow, hey, I'm going to leave you here for now, but we'll get ice cream afterwards. Your shadow goes, oh yeah? Roundly fuck you. I'll be here. But you go in there with just your ego. You go in there with just pretending you're all light, that you're a cheeky, great, sweet actor with a big smile. You go ahead and see how that works out for you. And you're not going to bring your darkness in there too. You're not going to bring in the truth of who you really are. You're going to bring in half of who you are. You're not going to bring that darkness. You're not going to bring the sinner in there, only the saint. Go fuck yourself. And you're walking in the room and you're not yourself. You're walking in the room and you're bearing false witness in one way or another.
Wow.
Okay, you see how I bring it back to Bible shit? Come on, bro. Come on.
Hit the pads, man. Hit the pads.
Hit, go. That's it.
You see
That's
those
what I'm
multi
talking
skills,
about.
bro?
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and I don't even know how to do that, but just don't be afraid to go in there and bring your French side.
To be true to yourself.
Bring sinner, bring saint, and bring everybody else in between. And if you're not in a good mood, fuck them. Maybe you're not in a good mood, and bring that in. If you want to cut somebody's head off, bring that in. If you hate everybody, bring that in. Whatever you are. There's just a lot of pressure on men and women, but you look a certain way, so there's this expectation on how you're supposed to behave, right?
Yeah.
Tell Angelina Jolie that. She didn't give a fuck. Angelina Jolie, Charlize Theron, when she did back in the day, she was not vain. They were willing to just look ugly. They were willing to just do things that were shocking.
Yeah.
So bring all that in there, man. And don't let them pigeonhole you because of your bone structure. You know what I'm saying? They will.
Yeah.
They will. They already have.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of pressure to be a certain way.
Yeah.
You know. But
that's a really, really good advice because it's easy to go into a room and want to be very, very composed and present the best version of yourself. But I think what's more memorable is being like absolutely yourself and bringing as much of your personality so they can really see you and feel like they can like relate to you. And
Yeah, but she's also a psychopath. Like legitimately a psychopath when it comes to acting.
Your body's just covered in bruises.
Bro. I'll never forget this. The first time I ever helped her self-tape was like 4 years ago. And she's like, babe, could you just sorry to have to do this to you, but I need to get this into my agent. Do you know? I'm like, oh, okay, good. You want to go somewhere private? Your boyfriend's sister is doing like a puzzle here. Your mom's banging pots over here. She's like, no, it's fine.
It was the only wall that worked.
Bro, I thought this was going to be like a comedy thing because I was like, there's no way she could focus here.
A common narrative that you'll hear is from feminists or from and apply it to other, every culture.
On getting a look in because it's all.
I honestly think that you could look at a man on the street now, point at him, and have a 50% chance that he hasn't had sex in the last year.
That's insane.
What we want is for women to have partners that they are fundamentally attracted to. If one sex loses, both sexes lose.
I asked my Twitter audience what I should ask you since you're going to be on the show, and they want to know about masculinity. So let me ask you, what does it mean to be a real man?
Masculinity has a very difficult place to stand in 2023, to be able to find a place which is both aspirational for young men to look up to and also acceptable publicly. That seems to be a very difficult line to balance at the moment. I would certainly say that integrity, telling the truth, courage, bravery.
Define integrity for me.
Your actions and your words aligning. The things that you say that you're going to do and the things that you actually do. the things that you do in public and the things that you do in private, the things that you do when nobody is watching, and the things that you do when you're on a stage. The alignment of essence and action, I think, would be a good way to get started with integrity.
It's pretty good. All right, so we've got integrity, truth, bravery, but I think I interrupted a longer list.
Courage, hard work, perseverance, protect, preserve, provide. You know, those are things which typically would have been the role of a man. Now, the problem that you have in the modern era is that the two things ancestrally that men would have done, which would have been warfare and big game hunting, have been outsourced to the army and the police force and supermarkets. So, you know, the roles that we were here to do ancestrally are a little bit less apt, they're less open for men to drop into now. And the question is, what does that mean? Where do men go from there?
So where do they go?
They need to find their own meaning. They need to find their own path and their own way to create purpose in the world. Now, because gender roles are up in the air, because you have 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree by 2030, you have £1,111 more being earned by women between the ages of 21 and 29 compared with men. Everything is up in the air. Everything is available for debate at the moment. But I think it is a challenging time to be a man at the moment in 2023. I think that it is very hard for you to find a firm place to stand with your masculinity, and it doesn't surprise me that guys are retreating into porn and video games, becoming nihilistic or cynical, or toxic in some ways as well. Like, there are a lot of different ways that people can try and cope with this problem, and not many of them are healthy.
So if people are outsourcing it to the police, the grocery stores there, so that they don't have to hunt, what are the proxies? So I look at you, you're jacked, you've obviously spent a lot of time putting on muscle, which might be, it's one of the proxies that I would say. In fact, if I were going to force myself to say what is a real man, protect for sure. We should talk about the disposable male hypothesis at some point. I actually find it really interesting. So definitely protect, willing to sacrifice, provide for sure. That's very meaningful to me, even though my wife is a successful entrepreneur in her own right. I very much see that as a role that I need to be prepared to do at all times. And I want to stay on the nice hot topic of being a real man. So I think because things are being outsourced, you have to structure this yourself. I think that protecting and providing is good, but I also think becoming high level at relationships, being a good communicator, not accepting some of the tropes about, oh, men are quiet, they don't use as many words. While I think that's true, I also don't think it's a very useful thing if you want a fulfilling life. But I think taking care of your body and mind in addition to your family, I would put as pretty paramount. So do you think about that? So if we're not going to go to war, is there a sense of going to war with the self?
Absolutely. So I had David Goggins on my show last week, and during that he said, when you go to war with yourself, you find a lot of peace.
That's interesting.
What he means by that, I think, is that inside a lot of men is a desire for forward momentum, for action, for doing things, for conquer. But what is there left to conquer? Well, yourself. You have yourself left to conquer. You have all of your inefficiencies, all of the ways that you fail forward on a daily basis.
Conquering, that's really interesting. So that's probably a big part of why I've become obsessed with business. I never planned to get into business. I identified as an artist growing up. I wanted to be a filmmaker. And then I realized to control the art, I had to control the resources, so I had to get into business to get rich. Very long story that I'm condensing very quickly.
It's a big loop to come back to be an artist again.
It is, yeah. And if I had to do it over, I probably wouldn't do it the same. But it ended up being incredibly useful. I would have just applied it directly to my thing in the beginning, but this idea of conquering, I think, is really interesting. And I think there's a lot of words that are becoming, because you said earlier to do these things that are ancestrally relevant, wasn't the word you used, but that's the idea, but is also socially palatable in this day and age. Maybe I'm just old enough that I am way less concerned about being socially palatable and am more, so I like the idea of being aggressive, conquering, those things make sense to me, but doing them in a context that isn't abusing other people. I mean, warfare is horrific, and may I never have to. And so to me, in a modern context, when you have the opportunity to conquer the body, you have an opportunity to conquer the mind, and you have an opportunity to conquer, I mean, that's if you're not going to start your own company, your role in a company, your role as a provider in your family, you're, in my case, running a business where you're against entropy. And I feel comfortable saying that since you have that in your Twitter bio.
Correct. We locally reverse entropy.
Yes.
That's what humans do.
So all of that to me is really interesting. Where do you come down? So I really want to know, real man. So do you think that conquering by proxy is important?
I think that it is a good outlet that men can rely on to satisfy that desire to move forward, right? Look at sports. Look at any game that you choose to watch, especially a team sport. What is it? It's LARPing warfare. It's warfare, right? You know, you have one side and another, you have chants, you have cheerleaders, you have people on the side, you have flag bearers. It's fucking warfare. So when you see men trying to find an outlet who don't have sport, who don't have new lands to go and conquer, who don't have big game to hunt down, they need to find something. And this is why you see the Goggins of the world or the Cameron Haynes of the world carrying a rock. I was recently with Cam Haynes. He made me carry a rock, a 72-pound rock, up a 1,000-foot elevation hill, back and forth between the two of us for 1.5 miles. It's got the word poser written on it. And the reason it says the word poser is because people call him a poser on the internet. And he's conquering himself. He's conquering his fears of insufficiency. And I think that, like Goggins said, when you go to war with yourself, you find an awful lot of peace.
It's a really interesting idea about finding peace. The big challenge for me was overcoming my mind. I very much had self-doubt, insecurity, all of that growing up, and I certainly wouldn't say I'm completely on the other side of it, but when you get it to a manageable level, it is a very fascinating journey. And for me, it really started with the body. And my business partners and I used to talk about Schwarzenegger a lot. We are very much of the Schwarzenegger generation. And it was always interesting to us that he was one of the few bodybuilders that could transform his physique to the level that he could, which requires an inhuman amount of discipline, perseverance, going back to some of the earlier things that you said, but he could apply it to other areas of his life. And so many other people couldn't. They could transform their body, but then it was like they couldn't abstract it to a principle that they could apply to other things.
So think about one of the reasons I think that women like guys who are in shape. So physically, it feels good in bed and it's nice to look at and all the rest of it. But what it really is an identifier of the type of values that it takes to be able to build that kind of body. It's conscientiousness, it's industriousness, it's hard work, it's self-agency, it's the ability to do hard things when nobody else is watching. Now, all of those manifest themselves physically in having a good, fit, lean physique. But what they mean is that if this person is faced with some other sort of challenge down the line, he's probably trustworthy, he's probably dependable. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that, well, I'm not too sure. And it's the same thing when it comes to Arnold. You know, he was somebody that was able to apply himself to a bunch of other different challenges that came up in life. And he was able to, I'm going to, as a heavily accented Austrian man, become, you know, one of the greatest action characters of all time. And there's a principle called the Matthew principle. From those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, more will be taken. And
that's rough.
Well, it is, but, you know, a small number of the rivers have almost all of the water. A small number of the stars have almost all of the mass. A small number of the people have almost all of the wealth. Why? Well, it's because success begets more success. You don't need some ruthless, capitalistic, patriarchal superstructure to misogynistically keep everybody down for this to happen. It's just that the people that are effective at one thing tend to be effective at a lot of things, and that compounds over time. I mean, look at you, look at your show. You know, like, you get moving early, you accumulate an audience, and audience gives you more audience because more shares mean more shares, and more people listen, and you become better, and there's a bigger budget to be able to spend on things. And the same thing goes for me, and the same thing goes for everybody that's good at something. They start to accumulate more and more and more. And from the outside, that can look like unfair equilibrium, some sort of nepotism or just non-meritocratic system at work. It's not. It's just people that are good at some things tend to be good at other things as well. And if you can align your ducks in a row in the right way, then you're at warp speed.
I have a phrase that has served me very well, because this will seem maybe funny to you, although you've been at this for quite a while. But when I started in podcasting, everybody was like, it's already played out, don't bother, all the people that are going to win have already won. It's funny, you've actually, I know you know one of the people that told me not to do it, and I never rat them out.
Tell them.
Because they're such a good person, I actually love them so much, but it makes me laugh that they were like, yeah, don't, it would be a waste of time. And I said, there's always room for the best. And for anybody coming up now, what's interesting to me is that I didn't show early signs of like, oh, this is the kid to watch. The only thing I had going for me, I was highly verbal. And that's always worked to my advantage, and I've certainly fed into that in terms of practicing something and trying to get even better at it. But I've told this story so many times, but my mother assumed I was going to fail. My best friend said he assumed I was going to marshmallow my way through life. The guy who is now my father-in-law, when I asked for his blessing to marry his daughter, he said no. It was just like nobody, literally, man, nobody except for my wife saw what I could become. But it really was drive and discipline. It was a just absolutely obsessive need to get better, which was born partly of insecurity, so let's be very clear about that. But it was also what I call the only belief that matters. I believed I could get better. And because I believed I could get better, I put my time and energy into getting better. And so I look at people today, kids today, guys today, whatever, and I'm just like, fucking get better. Like, figure out what it is that you want to be the best in the world at, and then go for broke. And are you going to become the greatest of all time? Probably not. But if you can 100x where you're at now in any chosen direction, your life is going to be 100 times better. But people aren't doing that, and that's not being reinforced in society, and that's the kind of thing that winds me up. It's like, if I were to tweet right now, the tweet that I want to put out, be aggressive, be aggressive, like the high school chant from when I was a kid, like, people are gonna freak out. But I think that certainly anybody that wants to be aggressive should be aggressive. My wife has a nice aggressive streak in her, so I've got no beef, guys, girls, whatever. But guys, 100% need to figure out that gear, because I didn't have it as a kid, and it leads somewhere dark and terrifying. And the only way out is to realize, oh, I can get better at anything, but I've got to be really aggressive about getting better.
Let's talk about confidence, because I think that's something that a lot of people wish they had more of in their life. The strange thing about pessimism is that the pessimist always finds out that they're right. The pessimist will always be correct, right? You believe that you can't do something, you're trying to beat the odds by doing anything that isn't exactly what you wanted to have happen. Right. And then when it does happen and you end up falling flat on your face, or the world doesn't deliver you what you wanted, maybe you're inoculated from failure because you had such low hopes in the first place. But really, being able to say, see, I told you so, life isn't worth living in the first place, that's a pretty low amount of reward to get for that. So one of my friends, Alex Hormozy, has a quote where he says, you do not become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. And what he means by that...
So good.
It's fucking
so
phenomenal.
Good. I fucking love Alex. Amazing.
So Rogan explained it when I was on his podcast about like building a mountain in layers of paint. Just individual iterations. So I have this idea called imposter adaptation, right? So you know about the imposter syndrome, which is not feeling like you are worthy of your successes. And if you do succeed, it was kind of a fluke, or you can always explain it away. There's a way that you can not make your own capacity culpable for the things that went well, but you will make your lack of capacity culpable for the things that go badly. So imposter adaptation is like hedonic adaptation, whereby you continue...
That's really good, yep.
As you continue to get better in the real world, as you continue to disprove your imposter syndrome time after time after time, it persists. You go, well, hang on a second. Every single situation that I've stepped into, I was adamant that I was going to be destroyed or flawed or fail or whatever. And I haven't. And yet this imposter syndrome sticks about. After a while, you have to admit to yourself that your imposter syndrome has got nothing to do with your capacity and everything to do with your addiction to feeling like an imposter.
Why would we be addicted to that?
Because it's comfortable. because it doesn't cause us to get our hopes up. If you don't believe that you can do anything, there is no fear of failure. It's the pessimist's trap, yet again.
It's interesting. So I hear about this a lot. People self-sabotage, all that stuff, because if you don't get your hopes up, then you can't fail. What I can't figure out, so that created misery in me. So in fact, let me set the stage. So I'm 18, 19, I see a movie called Amadeus. It's based on the real life composer Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And there's a real life character in there named Salieri, and Salieri in the movie has this lament to God, and he says, God, why did you make me just talented enough to realize I'll never be as good as Mozart? Why couldn't you have made me like everybody else and just love Mozart, or make me as good or better than Mozart? But to make me just good enough to realize I'll never be that good is devastating. And I used to think, oh my God, I'm understood. Somebody gets me because I'm just smart enough to realize how much smarter other people are. And it fucked with me for so long, man. Like, it really messed with me. And I always felt like I'm always like the dumb guy in my group of friends, but I'm smart enough to realize that they're all better than me. And it became so emotionally devastating that I did something about it. And what I can't figure out is, why aren't people doing something about it? Like, when you get my wife calls it the purgatory of the mundane. You're in like this, I think you've talked about this, where you can be in a situation where it will take you less time to travel 2 miles than 1 mile.
So the region beta paradox says that people can imagine that you would walk if you were going less than 1 mile, and you would drive if you were going 1 mile or more. So paradoxically, you would go 2 miles quicker than you would go 1 mile. And what this identifies is that sometimes worse situations can be better than better situations, because they give you activation energy to kick you out of the bottom. So you could imagine the person who is in a bad job. It's not super bad, their boss isn't that much of a dick, but they're not really fulfilled and they're not paid very well, but it'll just take over. Or someone's in a relationship and they're not abusive, but it doesn't exactly light their fire and they've sort of settled. Or someone lives in an apartment and it's in an alright piece of town, but there's mold in the ceiling and the landlord's a bit of a dick or whatever. All of these people would be in better situations if their situations were worse, because it would actually give them the activation energy to kick themselves out the other side.
So we're living in a time right now, I think it's roughly 1 in 3 young men, adult young men, are not having sex, haven't had sex in the last year. That number has skyrocketed in the last 10 years. So something is breaking. Now, from the outside, as a guy in my late 40s who's been successful, I look back at that and I'm like, what are you doing? So they have access to so much information. They have access to you talking about this. They have access to just an ungodly amount of information. What is going wrong, first of all, and then why isn't it so bad that they change? Because from the outside, it looks crazy that they're not making radical changes.
So the mating crisis that we're facing at the moment, which is what you're touching on, is, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest problem facing young people at the moment. It is, the culture wars are going to start to dwindle, and this is going to be the next big thing, if I was to bet some money on what's going to go on. So you're right, from 2008 to 2018, the number of men between 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the last year tripled from 8 to 28%. That finishes in 2018. Roll that forward into the pandemic. I honestly think that you could look at a man on the street now, between the ages of 18 and 30, point at him and have a 50% chance that he hasn't had sex in the last year.
That's insane.
This number went up for women as well. Not as starkly as it did for men, but it did go up for women too. So short-term mating is damaged. Now, when you're talking about the region beta paradox and how this relates, being comfortably numb or sedated out of effectiveness is something that I'm quite concerned about. So I think that a number of men, and we can get into this, are struggling to find a partner who is attracted to them. That causes them to retreat into porn and video games. And what they get is a very, very, very slight titrated dose of reproductive fitness cues from the porn and status and community cues from the video games. So there's a concept called young male syndrome, right? If you have a proliferation of single childless men, you have a lot of risk-taking behavior. You get into a relationship, your testosterone drops as a man. You have children, your testosterone drops. Again, that's adaptive because you don't want to be out doing risky stuff, jumping off cliffs, if you've got a wife and a child at home. So evolution tells you to calm it down a little bit. So you would say, well, if we have higher levels of sexlessness and singleness amongst men than ever before, you should see an associated increase in incel violence, in antisocial behavior, so on and so forth, and we haven't seen it. Young male syndrome has happened throughout tons and tons and tons of previous civilizations. Portugal in the 1700s, actually the first son was the only one that could get married because of an imbalance in the sex ratio. So they sent off sons 2, 3, 4, and 5 on these galleon ships, and they said, go and explore the new world. What they were really doing was exporting the men that were potentially going to be disruptive to civilization. So if we have all of these men that aren't having sex, where's all of the disruption? And it's my belief, the male sedation hypothesis is that men are being sedated out of their status seeking and their reproductive desires through porn and video games. Diana Fleischman has a paper called Uncanny Vulvas, where she talks about, from Uncanny Valley, she talks about how these fake cues of reproductive fitness can be delivered through screens. And would it be better to have a huge swath of high testosterone young men running around spray painting shit and pushing over granny? Probably not. But it's only a margin better for them to be so useless that they don't do it. Because if something is needed of them at some point, they're not going to have the capacity to do it. And for every step that they take further and further into uselessness, they become less and less attractive to the women that they're already struggling to get into a relationship with.
The truth is, hitting your career goals is not easy. You have to be willing to go the extra mile to stand out and do hard things better than anybody else. But there are 10 steps I want to take you through that will 100x your efficiency so you can crush your goals and get back more time into your day. You'll not only get control of your time, you'll learn how to use that momentum to take
an era where virtual uncanny vulvas, I love that, where virtual lives now are beginning to give you something that would have otherwise been so absent, it would have pushed you into so much discomfort that you would have taken action.
Correct.
But now you're getting just enough of it that you're
sedated.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say sedated. That's why I hesitated with that. There is, I think, there's an undercurrent. They know something is wrong, and when people pop their head up in a sexy enough way, they respond. So take Andrew Tate. So when he first kicked off, I completely ignored it. And I was just like, I did not find anything about it interesting. And then it was like, this is getting so big that the phenomenon of it has to be looked at. And so to the sedation hypothesis, they're aware that something is going wrong and they know it when they see it. So they got what let me put it into, thank you for letting me think out loud. Here's what I think is going on. We as a species model. We need somebody to look at and go, that's dope. So I had Schwarzenegger, right? And people like him. Grew up in the 80s, big muscly dudes everywhere. And for anybody that is an anime fan, Fist of the North Star, that whole story about, it was like counter-programming against sort of a more effeminate vibe that was going on in manga at the time. This like hyper Western style masculine 80s jacked guy
Is it like
that can just
Dragon
fucking
Ball Z
destroy
kind
everybody.
of, like that kind of build?
No, because that's all like, well, in Super Saiyan mode, yes, but this was a little bit earlier than that. So it literally looks like a Schwarzenegger kind of character, just fucking yoked. Because we are biological creatures, they have that impulse. They're looking for something to model after that. And when they don't get it, there's a sense of dis-ease. So societally, we have this dis-ease. I don't think it's necessarily, there's something obviously to the sedation because they're not breaking out into the young men. I get that. But there's an awareness of the problem from a, I don't feel right, I don't feel good, and when I see it, boom, it's explosive latching onto that. So now bringing it back to, if men are the result of what women are breeding us to be over a very long period of time, there's also tied into that the idea of what do I have to do to get laid? I actually debated whether my opening question to you, because a very long time ago, I was terrible with women. And I knew this guy, and he was very good with women. He was very attractive. And I said to him, dude, how do I get laid? Like, what's the secret?
Was your opening question going to be, how do I get laid?
Yeah. Like, what's the secret to getting laid?
Lisa must be upstairs. Can we not just call her? Someone call Lisa.
I've learned my lesson.
Someone ring Lisa. Yes, I mean, this is very, very interesting, and this is a little bit unpopular to talk about.
What is unpopular exactly, and why?
The reason it's unpopular is because the sexual revolution was seen as a universal good for women and for society at large. And I'm not convinced that the evidence bears that out for either men or women, right? So, as you said, women are the gatekeepers to sex. Men, on average, for the most part, are the sexual protagonists. I'm sure that before you even met Lisa, you could probably count on one hand the number of times that a girl comes up to you and chats you up. It basically never happens, right? It's men are the sexual protagonists. And one of the problems that you have in a world where sexual norms have been dissolved, we've decoupled sex from having babies, right, with hormonal birth control, and we've decoupled sex from having feelings now as well, through the dissolving of any kind of sexual norms. And sure enough, there was probably some work that needed to be done, but there is definitely something such as overshooting. So, as you say, women are the sexual gatekeepers, and men will meet the standard that they set for sex. So, if you need to become an upstanding member of the community, you need to have a reliable job, you need to ask for the daughter's father's hand in marriage, like the most difficult, most disagreeable, highest criteria person that should be in her life, that's what you have to get past. In order to be able to get married, in order to be able to get laid. Like, that's a lot of things that you have to do. And if that's what men have to do, sure enough, they'll do it. However, if men have to be in a nightclub at 2 o'clock in the morning, in the right place at the right time, and that's all they need to do to get sex, they will meet that criteria appropriately. So this isn't me saying women are at fault for the listlessness amongst young men, but they're not completely devoid from it either. Men will meet the criteria that women set for sex. Women are the demand, and men are the supply. The demand is what sets the price, and if you drop this price down too much, where is the incentive for men to be better men? Now, there is an incentive for men to be better men because they want to conquer themselves and they want to become better in the world. That only goes so far. Like, men have done an awful lot of things just to get sex. I learned salsa once. I learned to salsa dance. Like, men will do an awful lot in order to be able to get laid. And if the criteria that men have to meet gets dropped down and gets dropped down and gets dropped down, why would they work any harder? Why should they become an upstanding member of society? On average, men under the age of 30 in the USA are spending 2,000 hours a year playing video games, and 50% of them are either on prescription drugs or smoking weed.
Jesus. Okay, so I'm going to add a layer of complication. So I think all of that makes all the sense in the world to me. I think, though, that there is maybe there's two potential bigger problems. So you have lack of brotherhood, which may also be they're getting it through video games. And then there is it has become societally unacceptable to be hard as hell and to just be tough and to have that held up as a standard. So again, just going back to the 80s, you look at media, what does media celebrate? You're gonna have kids that wanna be that. My generation, media celebrated hard-nosed fighters, big muscles, get through anything to save the damsel in distress. Once you say, can't have a damsel in distress, like I think, because I don't know how much you know about what we do, but so all of this, everything that you've ever seen me do, everything that you know about me is just so that I can tell stories. Because that is like my key motivator in life. It's the thing I love the most. Certainly I've been wildly impacted by. Impact theory is, my theory on how to impact people at scale is through story. So you give people this thing, this ideal to look up to, and we've removed the damsel in distress and said you can't have that. Guys that are tough ass, hard-nosed fighters, that's all toxic masculinity, so that's all pulled away. Parents are coddling the life out of their kids. Like my mom, who was very protective by those standards, would just let me ride my bike miles away from the house. And we would go to like a bike track and do jumps, no parents, nobody watching, older kids beat up younger kids, it just is what it is. And like that was the thing. So you've got all of that stuff, and now you have, and there's no coming of age ritual, nothing like that. And so kids don't have role models to look up to. They're told that all their impulses to be aggressive, to be tough, to play rough, all of that is bad and negative and it should be wiped away. And all of the media is like, now we're really gonna open a can of worms. So there's a reason that there is one anime called Demon Slayer. there's one manga called Demon Slayer, it also happens to also be an anime, that outsells the entire Western comic book market. So Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, X-Men, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, all of it together is outsold by Demon Slayer. And the reason is they did not get the culturally appropriate memo, and so they make content for 12-year-old boys and they make content for 12-year-old girls, and they do not try to blend them. And by trying to blend our entertainment and not giving guys basically rock'em sock'em robots fighting, blood, girls scantily clad, all of that, you just sort of get this like milquetoasty thing. Yeah, like what exactly? Exactly am I aspiring to? So women aren't holding us. It is not women's fault. I want to be hyper clear. This is a societal problem that is everybody's in the mix. So all I'm saying is everybody's going to have to contribute. So I'm, by the way, a personal responsibility guy. I'm only interested, hey, if you have a problem, you need to do something about it. Just to be very clear, because I can hear the comment section going crazy already. There's a low bar for sex.
Correct.
There are no manly men to look up to. There are no coming of age rituals anymore. And we have the new opioid for the masses. If it used to be religion, now it is video games, weed, whatever. And that combination is terrifyingly lethal.
Let's talk about the potential pushback that you might get from girls here. And quite rightly, like, girls needed equal access to education and employment. There were restrictive sexual norms that stopped them from doing whatever it was that they wanted to do. There are articles that you can see in magazines like Cosmopolitan and Elle that say things like how to sleep with him and not catch feels. How to sleep with him and not catch feels. Okay, so what you're teaching young girls to do is disembody themselves from the most sacred act that they can do, which is allowing another person inside of them, to the point where they negate any sense of connection emotionally, and you want to call that freedom. I'm not convinced that that makes girls particularly free. If I was a mother and I had a daughter, I would not want her to lean into that kind of a lifestyle. I think that I would want her to treat it as something that was sacred. And I think that that sounds a lot like freedom. But that's not for me to say that you shouldn't do it. Okay, so the manly men thing. Where are the manly men at? Well, they tried to push a more feminine view of men in romance novels, in dark romance novels, especially in the mid-2010s. And they didn't sell well. It didn't sell well because, on average, not that many women are fantasizing about a very agreeable, sort of soft, effeminate man. They wanted a man that was going to be useful in a war and useful at parenting children. Like, those are the two things, right? So what you have is a difference between stated and revealed preferences. So what happens, what is popular to be put out there, this is something that should be aspired to. You know, fucking Timothée Chalamet is a cool guy, and Harry Styles in a dress. You know, those are guys I'm sure that they absolutely slay. However, most guys can't pull that off. And when you throw that out into the realm of female attraction, those sorts of novels don't seem to sell well. So you have fewer and fewer traditionally masculine roles that men can step into in terms of role models. Then you have this sort of stated preference by the media that anything where you do start to veer toward that is toxic. You have this sort of disembodied cultural milieu where women are supposed to give away sex completely freely and call it freedom. That's not for me to say. I'm not anti, dude, I ran nightclubs for 15 years, right? I've met 1 million people in my life. This was the world that I existed in. But I think that over time, most of the guys and girls that I worked with come out the other side, and what they realized was that actually I really do want to be in a committed relationship with somebody that I respect. And I do want to treat my body like it's something which is sacred. This isn't restrictive sexual norms making another rise to try and keep women down, or men. this is treating your body like something that you should care about, and treating your spirit like something that should be kept sacred.
Let's talk about the spirit. So I was deeply impacted by a book called The Power of Myth. And in the book, written by a guy named Joseph Campbell, he talks about how he thinks a big part of the divorce rate is that there are no more rituals. So marriage rituals have lost sort of all their teeth. There's no coming of age rituals, certainly not for guys. And so there's no transitional moments. And when I think about the spirit, I think about how are you contextualizing something? How are you looking at it? What have you decided? What meaning have you decided to ascribe to this thing? And one, we have, talk about something that I don't know the stats on and all that, but I know that there's a fatherless crisis going on. That you have more and more homes where kids are being raised without a father. There is a sense that there's not really a distinction between the genders. And even if there was, do you really need somebody that's masculine to bring anything to the table? And then you start looking at things like not having a coming of age ritual, not growing up with a father, not having masculine role models, and how much of this is playing into it. So anyway, I read this book, I'm deeply impacted by this idea of there need to be coming of age rituals. And so when I got married, I decided that I was going to really put myself through something. I wanted to be a different person. I did, yeah. So, but again, this comes back to how do you contextualize it? So I don't think of it as a tattoo. Obviously it is, and that's how it manifests, whatever. But I didn't think of it like that. I didn't treat it like that. I don't think of it like that now. It's the only tattoo I got. It's the only tattoo I will ever get. Because for me, I wanted to ritualistically scar myself to be different before and after getting married. And I wanted it to be painful. And so it was like, I was thinking about all these things. Okay, I want it to be meaningful. I want it to be painful. I want it to be permanent. So it literally was, do I brand myself or do I get a tattoo? And dude, it is not causative, but I've been married for 20 years. And having something like that where you say, I'm going to ascribe a lot of meaning to this. I'm going to do something that is important. And I don't know, have you read Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela?
No.
He has got to be the person I admire the most, like just of all the humans that are modern enough that I have a very tangible way to get to know their thought process. So he writes this book about his Long Walk to Freedom. And in it, he talks about what his tribe did to kids, I think when they turned 14. And they do this whole ceremonial thing where you start with your mother and the men burst into the home and they rip you away from the mother and they strip you naked and they bring you in front of the whole tribe. And then I think there was like 4 or 5 boys that they did this at the same time. They sit you naked, they make you splay your legs, and then the shaman or whatever has a really sharp rock and he grabs your foreskin and he pulls it out and he fucking slices it off, no anesthetic, and you have to yell a warrior prayer. And then they cover you in mud, and then a young woman, I don't know how they select her, cleans all the mud off your body at the end of it. And I was just like, damn, man. Like that.
You didn't fancy that?
I did. I actually was. Look, would I have wanted that to happen?
Would you
No,
have had to have asked Lisa's acceptance if you were going to get rid of your foreskin?
My parents took care of that very early, but
I want to know that it could have been a question, darling. Who owns the foreskin? Is it a, sort of a co-ownership thing here? Is it mine? Is it ours? Is it our foreskin?
Yeah.
But anyway, yes.
So I think there are things that we can do to build structure back into this stuff, to start giving people landmarks to anchor their identity, to construct the person that they want to become so that they can end up escaping out of this gray goo or whatever you called it, which culturally seems to be unintentionally. I think everybody had great intentions. But when I think about how we get back out of this, it's interesting. It comes back to the idea that you've been talking about, that Jocko has, I think, a really just cut to the heart of the issue. Discipline equals freedom. That there need to be a vision, a structure that you can articulate, something that you can say, this is a real man, and then aim for it, work at it every day. I did a tweet thread about this. Now, this is what I think a man is. And I don't always hit it, but I'm certainly striving towards it. But without a clear vision, without something that people can articulate, without something that people are building towards, just drifting.
The problem that you have is, without any grand narratives to hold everybody together, and that traditionally would have been religion, right? That would have been this arc, this single unifying principle that held everyone together. And everything has been left up for debate, and that's fine. Like, progress is absolutely great, but there's been a lot of baby that I think has been thrown out with the bathwater. You know, whether it be courting rituals, coming of age rituals, values that both men and women should take from themselves. Like, for instance, the fact that women are really emotionally intelligent. Why should it be the case that women should dispel with that because that's maybe a more classically feminine trait? Well, that is your power as a woman. That is your feminine wisdom. If you've got execs or people that work here, quite rightly, you want them to be the ones that are able to step in and use that ability. To say, okay, so the fantastic ability that you have to be able to really attentively tune in to other people's emotions within the office, don't do that. What I'm going to get you to do is try and reverse engineer some other idea of what I think that a woman's role should be, because this is now what we would potentially call freedom. I think that it's very easy to throw everything up in the air and to try and start from scratch all of the different designs for what men and women should do within their life. And if you don't have these rituals, if you don't have these roles, if you don't have these role models, you're going to really struggle.
Do you think that we need clearly defined gender roles?
I think that men and women have biological predispositions that cause them to be better suited toward different sorts of tasks. For instance, spatial rotation. At the age of 3, boys show around about a 50 to 70% better throwing accuracy compared with girls. Women, on the other hand, have better, I think it's called local recall, and this is why men always lose their keys, but women can tell where it is. And let's think about why this might be the case. Men, ancestrally, would have been looking at things that were running perhaps sideways along to them with a spear in their hand. That means that spatial rotation, being able to manipulate 3D objects in space in their mind and then cause that to happen in the real world, would have been really, really adaptive. Also, if women are staying at home and they are moving around the local area, perhaps picking berries, perhaps making sure that all of the children are being looked after, this is the tree that's good at this time of year, this is the tree that's not so good at this time of the year, they're supposed to be good at that as well. Like, does this mean that women are supposed to be condemned to be domestic prostitutes looking after the household? No, obviously not. But it means that there are capacities that each different sex has that dispose them to doing different things. I mean, this is Peterson's whole thing, right? You turn a society more egalitarian and you end up having more men going into STEM and more women going into care roles. There are 4 times as many female fighter pilots in the US Air Force as there are male kindergarten teachers in the USA by percentage.
By percentage, yeah.
Yeah. So 2% of kindergarten teachers are male and 8% of US Air Force fighter pilots are female. Now, I'm perfectly happy to have a conversation about whether there should be more female fighter pilots, but there definitely should be more male kindergarten teachers as well. And why is that? Well, it's because it seems to be that...
Wait, why do you think there should be more?
More male kindergarten teachers?
Yeah. Why, if people are just selecting out?
Because they serve as a very good role model to both deal with boisterous boys and also educate them effectively. I think that the educational outcomes that you get from young boys, especially when they have a male teacher, seem to be better. And if you are only getting a 1 in 50 chance that you're ever going to deal with a male teacher as a young boy.
In kindergarten, though.
Correct.
So, all right, so if Peterson's right, well, it's not even Peterson. Peterson's just relaying the stats. If the stats are correct and the more opportunities you give people through social safety nets, that the more they go hardcore in traditionally male jobs like engineering and traditionally female jobs like nursing care, how do you think about that in terms of the kindergarten teachers? Because it would seem that men are more interested in things, women are more interested in people. And when it comes to kids, like, I would rather have my eyes gouged out than become a kindergarten teacher. That sounds like a unique form of hell.
Perhaps it does, but there's also a lot of other things that people have to do because they serve the wider society.
Oh, damn. Do you want to conscript people into being kindergarten teachers?
I certainly think, as Richard Reeves calls it, that the heel, there's STEM and then there's heel, and it's like hospital workers, education, something and something else, right? It's a more sort of soft side that men who have got labour force participation rates amongst men have declined by 0.1% every month since 1950.
Whoa.
87% in 1950 to now 68% today.
In those fields or full, just period?
Everything.
What?
Yep. Labour force participation.
Hold on. Define labour force participation. It sounds like you're saying that 30+% of guys just aren't working.
That seems to be the case.
What?
That seems to be where the stats are, what the stats are showing. Yeah.
Whoa. I had no idea. This sounds so crazy.
That's what the projections suggest, that 65%, only 65% of men in America will be participating in the labor force. Now, this may be the absolute fine-tuned bits of the data. Maybe, is it a full-time job? Is it contract? Can people be doing stuff on the side? Right. But men typically in that labor force participation. So you have an ever-decreasing group of men that are participating in the labor force, and opening them up into new job roles might be a great way to get them back into it. The reason that I think that having male kindergarten teachers especially is important is that they can control boisterous boys, and that they can coach young boys that are coming from increasingly fatherless homes on how to behave. When we're talking about this predisposition thing again as well, it is so apparent that men and women have different natures from the get-go. 3-year-olds, there's a really, really fantastic bunch of researchers, Dr. Tanya Reynolds, Jamie Krems, Christina Duranty, all of these are evolutionary psychology people. Joyce Benenson is the leader of this particular thing. Joyce Benenson observed a ton of kindergarten children, right, ages 3 to 5. And if you watch what boys do, they will find an enemy that they need to band together against. Maybe it's aliens, maybe it's cowboys, maybe it's whatever. They will band together and they will go and take them down. If you look at what the girls are doing, they are trying to keep something alive for the most part. It's your rabbit, it's your baby, it's the person.
So interesting.
So why is that the case? This isn't socialization. This is cross-culturally. You see this when you give chimps, you give baby girl chimps a soft toy to cuddle, they will cuddle it. You give the boy a stick and he'll throw it. Male and female, I guess. This predisposition is before socialization, and it does a disservice to the natural wisdom that males and females have to say that it's not something that should be used. So going back to the labor force participation thing, I really think that we're going to have a mating crisis on our hands, which is driven out of education and employment. And on the other side of this, you have a smaller cohort of men that women are going to find attractive. That's not good for the women either. Women want a mate that they can contend with. They want a mate that they feel they are attracted to, that they can respect and admire, and so do men. And right now, you have an ever-increasing cohort of high-performing women competing for an ever-decreasing cohort of ultra-high-performing men.
So how do we balance that out? So it's not putting brakes back on the women.
Correct.
So
that's the first thing that this conversation needs to get out front, and it's the main thing that this conversation gets wrong. As soon as you say 2 women for every 1 man completing a 4-year US college degree, women on average earning £1,111 more than men do between the ages of 21 and 29. Oh, so what you're saying is that you want to actually drag women back. They've only just recently got educational employment and parity. No, I'm not saying that. That is absolutely not what you need to have happen. Is it possible for women to fundamentally become attracted to men that are less educated or less employed than they are? That's also quite difficult. The ground truth of hypergamy, railing against that is like railing against the laws of thermodynamics.
Women date across or up.
Correct.
That's hypergamy.
Correct, exactly. So on average, women want to date a man that's as educated or more educated and as wealthy or wealthier. This is on average. There are women who can find, white-collar women that can date blue-collar guys. But you're bucking the trend if you do that. This is what I call the tall girl problem, right? So everybody has a girl friend who is 6 foot without heels, and if she wants to wear heels on a night out and look pretty, she's looking at professional athletes for her dating, because on average, women want to date a man that's about 21 centimeters taller than they are.
How many inches is that?
7.
Whoa, okay, Jesus.
On
I
average.
didn't realize it was such a big difference. So I heard you say once, and it really hit when you were describing that. You're like, look, if you're a tall woman, you might be willing to date a guy that's a couple inches shorter than you. The odds of you dating somebody that's 10 inches shorter than you, no.
Yes.
Probably not gonna happen. And so you begin to see the discrepancy in earning power, et cetera, can become a problem real fast. All right, so we're not re-breaking women.
No.
But we are doing what?
So, one of the problems you have is that trying to raise up men's achievement educationally and in terms of employment is very difficult. Like, how do you, if you're not putting the brakes on women, how are you putting the gas on men, so to speak? We don't want to stop women from achieving, and we can't beat the thermodynamics of hypergamy, right? So you need to use cultural technology to try and fix this problem in some way or another. I think one of them would be to re-pedestalize motherhood. I think that
Put it back on a pedestal?
Yes, correct. I think that if you derogate motherhood and basically treat it like if a woman becomes a mother, she is a second-class citizen that got rubed into being a domestic prostitute by the patriarchy. It's like, well, I don't know, man. Like, being a mother seems like a pretty fucking important job to me. I don't think that that seems to be some sort of second-class citizen. Are you saying that your mother's a second-class citizen? My mum stayed at home and looked after me for the first 9 years that I was alive. I don't think that that was her being a second-class citizen at all. I think it was an unbelievably noble sacrifice that she stopped her career to raise me.
When I meet parents, I actually thank them for their service, and I'm not
Mind your manners around Lady Beatrice.
I'm not joking. I'm not trying to be tongue in cheek.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, because I don't have kids. Somebody has to. Like,
Right.
we need people raising children well. My wife has this really cool story. We were in line or she was in line at a buffet. One behind her asks, like, oh, what do you do? And my wife starts describing, questions and all that. This was back then. And the woman was like, Lisa said, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I'm just a mother. And Lisa was like, hold the phone. Like, that is one of the most important things you could ever do. Like that, what a gift. All this stuff. And the woman was like, wow, thank you so much for saying that. And when Lisa was telling me, I was like, wow, that's crazy, because when I was a kid, that was still like, yo, mom's like the hardest thing ever. Like, there, and my mom was a boss at being a mom. Like, my mom didn't work, same as yours, for a very long time. But my mom, like, to raise me, I don't wish that on my worst enemy. And my mom was a badass, man, like a real badass. So anyway, I think that's hugely important. So yes, when I see parents, I'm like, thank you, honestly, for your service. I really appreciate it.
What is up, my friend? Tom Bilyeu here, and I have a big question to ask you. How would you rate your level of personal discipline on a scale of 1 to 10? If your answer is anything less than a 10, I've got something cool for you. And let me tell you right now, discipline, by its very nature, means compelling yourself to do difficult things that are stressful, boring, which is what kills most people, or possibly scary or even painful. Now, here is the thing. Achieving huge goals and stretching to reach your potential requires you to do those challenging, stressful things and to stick with them even when it gets boring, and it will get boring. Building your levels of personal discipline is not easy, but let me tell you, it pays off. In fact, I will tell you, you're never going to achieve anything meaningful unless you develop discipline. All right, I've just released a class from Impact Theory University called How to Build Ironclad Discipline that teaches you the process of building yourself up in this area so that you can push yourself to do the hard things that greatness is going to require of you. All right, click the link on the screen, register for this class right now, and let's get to work. I will see you inside this workshop from Impact Theory University. Until then, my friends, be legendary. Peace out.
The careerism that we're seeing amongst young women, like, absolutely, if you've spent a ton of time in university, like, quite rightly, you should lean into your career for as long as you want. But 80% of women who are childless are involuntarily childless, right? That means that they didn't plan to not have kids and to not have a family.
Wow, what percentage?
80%. So of all women that are childless, and this is from a Dutch study, Professor Rune, it's a meta-analysis from 2010.
Okay, I was going to say this has to be super recent. So
2010.
they're getting caught off. I'm
Yes,
going to run
correct.
my career.
Correct.
I think I'm good. I'm
Yep.
a boss bitch. And then 39 rolls around, and it's like, yo, this isn't fun.
Yeah, and they're really struggling. So, I mean, and this is brutal for these women. So there's an entire support group, there's a number of support groups. So if there is any women listening who feel like they're in this cohort, somebody that planned to have a family and haven't, if you have a quick Google, there are a bunch of support groups that seem to be really, really great online. But a really great friend, Stephen Shaw, who's just released a documentary called Birth Gap, talks about this, that these women mourn for a family that they never had. Oof. And they talk about like grief, but no one died. It's that no one was born.
That's heavy, man.
And when you think about the fact that there's a bunch of things going on here, an over-belief in like fertility treatments being super effective, and oh, well, you know, I've heard that more women had children over the age of 40 than under the age of 20 in 2019 in the UK, which is true, but it doesn't say how hard or easy it was. It's not easy, and going on IVF is brutal on a woman's body. Some of the stories that some of my friends' wives have had that have been on it, they find themselves buying mountains of pink doilies and stuff because they've just got these floods of hormones going through their body, and they wake up the next day from this stupor like, what the fuck just happened to me? So you have women that leave it too late, basically. And if you've spent a good bit of time in school, why not? Like, why wouldn't you want to lean into, I'm going to lean into my employment for a good amount of time, Like, no one, definitely not me, is trying to pull that back from women. They absolutely should have that. But they need to know that there are some hard ground truths to their biological age, which means that if you want to have a family, you cannot leave it until you are 35. And if you do, you can leave it until you're 35. If you leave it until then, you are going to start fighting with odds in a very dangerous way. And one of the other things, I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio showed this pretty perfectly, that men really seem to value youth in a partner. And for all that it is great that women can go and get the PhD and the 6-figure income and all the rest of it, you're going to be competing with a 21-year-old barista from Starbucks.
Can we just say the hard truth?
What?
Guys don't care how much money you make.
Correct.
It isn't an advantage. Cool if you want to do it. I love it the most. Remember, I'm married to a female who prides herself on being an entrepreneur, total hardcore, all of that. But God, let me tell you, as I would tell my wife and have, like, that isn't what excites me about her. In the business, it's amazing because she's so fucking good.
Yeah.
But as far as like what I'm attracted to in a woman,
correct.
Literally, not only does it not matter. So my wife and I have been talking about this. I'm sure that many people have had this realization long before me, but here is something I find utterly fascinating. A woman, if you really want the cheat code, like you want to like really make a woman feel good with you, of course you have to love and support. But even the word support is different. I wouldn't say a guy necessarily would rank support that high, but you have to love and support a woman. But if you really want to unlock things, you have to make her feel beautiful and safe. If you make her feel beautiful and safe, you're amazing. Now, if you want the flip on a guy, I think it's loved and appreciated far more than supported, because I want to sacrifice for you. Going back to the disposable male hypothesis, I'm prepared to die for you. I don't want you to support me. I want you to let me support you. And I want you to celebrate that instead of be like, well, you're doing that for you. No, I'm not. Like, you may not have asked it of me, but I am doing it very specifically for you. That feels so powerful. And then the other two elements, that if a woman really wants to unlock a guy, you want to make him feel powerful. Like, if you make a guy feel powerful, you've just unlocked everything you could ever hope to unlock. But that means that I want to out-earn you. I want to outperform you in certain things. Long story there, but yeah.
There are some unfortunate ground truths to hypergamy here as well. So in relationships where the woman out-earns the man, they're 50% more likely to end in divorce. In relationships where the woman contributes more than 80% of the household income, they're twice as likely to end in divorce. Women on average are 3 times more likely than men to say that they wouldn't get into a relationship with a man who was less educated or less employed than they are.
Oof.
All of this together is not to
accuse... You mean the one about erectile...
50%, yeah. In relationships where the woman out-earns the man, the man is 50% more likely to have to use erectile dysfunction medication.
Can every woman just slow down? I've heard you say that before. It's like, I want everybody to slow down and hear that. Guys want to feel powerful. Okay, I'm at the risk of just obliterating my own channel. I'm gonna say,
Let's
all right,
do it. Press the self-destruct button.
yeah, here is what I want people to understand. And going back to guys, gentlemen, please hear me when I say, to your point, the most sacred thing that men and women can do together is have sex. But now really think about what that is for a second. The messy reality of what that is. You, as a woman, you are inviting a man inside you, to use your word. That's a big fucking thing. Like, to what I want guys to understand, you have to be worthy of that. Get worthy of that moment.
Yes.
Not that you were clever, you know, in like the pickup artist kind of way. Yeah. No. Really be somebody for when everybody's stone cold sober and we're in the cold light of day and we're 10 years into a relationship, that she looks across at you and is like, damn, you're worthy of that. That to me, like, if a real man is that.
That was always the problem with the pickup artist stuff, because what it was doing was, it was you playing a role to be the person that she would actually be attracted to. But she was never attracted to you, she was attracted to the role that you were playing.
Right.
That's not attraction. Okay, so we have this sort of unfortunate imbalance in the dating market, right? That this ever increasing cohort of high-performing women have an ever decreasing cohort of ultra high-performing men across here. This means...
And the men don't care how much you make, and if you make too much more than them, they need to use
erectile dysfunction.
Yeah.
So we don't know where that comes from. I really, really don't. I mean, we don't know why it's the case. We don't know whether it is a byproduct of the type of relationship that the men and women have. We don't know whether this
I'm gonna guess, it's just a guess, but I feel very confident in saying he doesn't feel powerful. What has he conquered? So I really think without war, the thing for people to conquer is either your career or a company, to start and run your own company.
Yep.
That's it. That's your proxy. Go forth and prosper.
And like if you're being out-earned by your
yes,
partner. Yeah.
She's dunking on you.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel good. And to your point about we are locally fighting entropy, we're locally comparing ourselves.
Correct.
So you're going to compare yourself to your wife now, or your girlfriend, whatever. In the beginning, I made the mistake. I want people to hear me very clearly. In the beginning, I thought my wife needed me to be better at everything for her to find me sexually attractive. That's 100% not true. And no one would want to be in a relationship with somebody that's better than them at everything. But this is where you really have to, like, my wife and I talk about what is she good at, what am I good at, so that one, there's space for that person to go and be great at their things, and we're not, and we don't end up competing at things. And this is, we really have to pay attention to this because we build a company together.
Yes.
And so you want to talk about danger, Will Robinson is just a whole nother level. But anyway, so he's taking the erectile dysfunction medication because, speaking from experience, like in that moment, I want to feel powerful. I'm not looking for somebody who, I'm not trying to be dominant, I'm not looking for her to be submissive,
Yep.
but I want to feel powerful in that moment.
So I've got this story about psychiatric patients in the Blitz. So during World War II, London is being bombed by the Germans, and it's this very, very aggressive period of bombardment. Most of the men are already doing jobs either fighting the war, they're away overseas, they're part of the home front, or they are trying to rebuild things, they're working as police officers, etc., etc. Most of the women are also working. They're working as nurses, they're part of the artillery production, they were being pushed into factories, all sorts of things. So you basically didn't have sufficient people to do extra jobs that were required. Now, bombs are dropping on Britain, and you need ambulance drivers and fire truck drivers in order to be able to get to the fires that are caused by the bombs. There were these psychiatric patients that had been comatose in clinics for years, sometimes 5-10 years, completely unresponsive, just catatonic, and they would be rolled over, their bedpans would be cleaned, they'd be fed some food or whatever, and they'd be left. Fires are lit all around London because of these bombs that have been dropped on them, and there's no one to drive the fire trucks. And these men that have been unresponsive for 5 or 10 years sit up, get dressed, go downstairs, and they start driving fire trucks and ambulances.
What?
If you give a man a purpose and the ability to achieve it, he will crawl over broken glass with a smile. That story suggests that feeling powerful and competent is something that can generate an awful lot of good sensation, of motivation, of discipline, in the best, most service, community-oriented form of the word, right? But I think we need to kind of probably close some potentially toxic open loops that we've got here with regards to this dynamic between men and women. It is not the case that the only way that we can have successful relationships is to drag women back, or to somehow give men unfair advantages to try and push them out ahead. That is not what either of us are trying to put forward in this conversation. What we want is for women to have partners that they are fundamentally attracted to. If you cannot find a partner that you genuinely are attracted to and that you genuinely want, that's not good for you either. If one sex loses, both sexes lose, right? That is really, really important. When it comes to the solutions, it's difficult, man. I'm writing a book on this at the moment, and it is not an easy...
What's the book about exactly?
The mating crisis. this imbalance between the sexes that we've got at the moment, the ground truth of hypergamy and how that is causing this ever-increasing group of women to chase after an ever-decreasing group of men. I'm sure that you've seen the statistics from Tinder. The bottom 80% of men compete for the bottom 20% of women, and the top 80% of women compete for the top 20% of men. Now, these men are commitment averse, so quite rightly, they have the pick of whoever it is. These men are commitment averse, so quite rightly, they have the pick of whoever it is.